Hey guys, welcome to the channel. This is part 4 of What If Naruto Had a Gaming System. If you guys enjoy this what if, then comment down below and let me the let go of the video is 100 likes, so like this video, let me that you're interested in the series and you want the next part, then go ahead and check out the other what ifs in the channel. Before we start, please do support for more awesome content. Don't forget to subscribe and leave, also share the video with your friends and link in the description. So let's go. Aburame Shino. Here. Abashi Tenma. Hi sensei. Yamanaka Ino took in a series of deep breaths as she decided to calm herself. She was a member of the Yamanaka clan, which prided itself in its mind arts, and as such, she, as well as numerous others privy to the intricacies and delicacies of the clan's workings, were expected to keep a level head, and to calmly analyze any and all scenarios which came before her. The Jonin you would find angrily snarling as he kicked a stone down the street and brandished his kunai at any minor offense was more than often troubled, and his temporary anger which he displayed was not an enduring personality trait, but rather, more than likely it was a standalone feature that had arose due to external circumstances. Hyuga Hinata. Hi sensei. Inazuka Kiba. I'm here sensei. Arf. Arf. Her father had taught her more than once to always keep an eye on the people around her, as that was how you knew the good shinobi from the bad ones. It was always best to avoid getting on the bad sides of certain individuals who may or may not be deemed unstable. He had also told her not to judge others, as well as to avoid having any undue prejudice against people, because no one existed with their entire life stories trailing behind them. As such, they all had different reasons or motivations for one thing or another. This, of course, did not mean that Yamanaka Ino was able to take all that advice to heart, especially when it did her absolutely no damned good. Uchiha Sasuke. Here. Uzumaki Naruto. Silence. Uzumaki Naruto. Ino did her best to try and remain unflappable, desperately fighting the urge to shrink into her seat with all vehemence. Of course, the dog breath just had to have noticed it, as Kiba gave her what she easily considered to be the sixth most irritating grin in existence, as he spoke up. Naruto still hasn't shown up for class, Mizuki-sensei. The canine enthusiast yelled out, once more speculating the rumors that went flying around the class. Is that so? Yeah, it's been 3 weeks since we had to deal with the orange idiot. Huh, I guess we have you to thank for that, Ino. Once more, Ino resisted the urge to shrink as the eyes of everyone in the class fell upon her. Sasuke-kun was staring at her. He was actually looking in her direction, which, on any other occasion, would have made her feel giddy with joy, but his eyes were not looking at her in the way she would have wanted. Of course, she was Yamanaka Ino, so despite her own inner thoughts, she meticulously ensured that her body language and outward appearance maintained the aura and look of someone who was utterly self-assured, utterly confident, and did not, for even the briefest of seconds, doubt herself. I don't know what you're on about, Mutt-face. He growled. Yeah right. You think we didn't hear about how the blonde knucklehead asked you out and you turned him down flat cold? The mumbles and rumors were spreading to a level she did not find herself particularly comfortable with. So, he asks Forehead over there out on a daily basis, and she turns him down all the time. Said pink-haired bimbo let out a shout of indignation at being called Forehead, that Ino promptly ignored. Well, except she never turned him down hard enough for the idiot to just up and vanish for 3 weeks. Hell, I haven't even seen him around the ramen stand that he loves like it's his mother. Correlation does not equal causation, Ino had wanted to say, but she restrained her tongue from emitting the initial consonant because she knew that it would go over Kiba's head. More importantly, that might either mean that Shikamaru had been rubbing off on her more than she would like, or that she was another nerd-like Forehead girl. And how is any of this my fault? For all we know, he could have just woken up one day and decided to drop out. Ino argued, her voice laced with frustration. But as she spoke, her mind replayed the events that followed her rejection of Naruto. He had come to school the next day, seemingly unaffected, which had initially eased her guilt. However, when he abruptly stopped showing up, her relief turned to concern. Each day, she found herself hoping he was just sick or skipping school, anything to suggest his absence wasn't because of her. Even as she tried to convince herself otherwise, a nagging feeling tugged at her conscience, making her wonder if her words had indeed played a role in his decision to leave. Ino clenched her fists, her frustration growing. Why does my mind always go back to that orange idiot and that stupid conversation after I rejected him? Geez, I don't get you, Kiba said, scowling. It's not like the knucklehead ever had any real hopes of becoming a shinobi, and I'm sure even academy teachers have tried more than once to get him to quit, but you managed to pull it off with a few words, so why the hell won't you take the credit? Yamanaka Ino blinked, then rapidly resisted the urge to yell and instead bit the inside of her cheek. Take the credit. She was supposed to be proud of harshly turning down Naruto's enthusiastic, bubbly request for a date. To feel accomplished that she had shot down someone's confident advances, when there were numerous hopeless romantics out there who would never even possess a shred of that same courage to brazenly ask out someone they fancied. She stared at Kiba, wondering if the boy even fully understood the implications of what he was saying, and she sorely doubted that he did. What she found doubly disconcerting, however, was that there were numerous other people in the class who, for one reason or another, actually shared in Kiba's sentiments. For Kami's sake, no matter how annoying or how bright or how obnoxious Naruto was, the boy had done literally nothing wrong for people to feel completely vindicated by the fact that he was potentially heartbroken enough to stop coming to school. But she did not voice that. No, she was not a person easily cowed by peer pressure, but she was a person who cared about her image. The knuckleheads around her would one day in the nearest future possibly be her teammates that she would need to rely on in the field. And as such, it was best to move with the flow of the crowd, to be of the same mind regarding certain topics, and to ensure that she was not viewed too differently or ostracized. Idly, her mind noted a lesson her father had once showed her during one of their clan training sessions. A brief experiment where he had brought up 3 kunai, 2 of them 12 inches and one 11, then showed it to a group of 8 volunteers, asking them to pick the shortest. 7 of the volunteers were in on the experiment, and all picked the wrong kunai, but the actual subject was confused. He knew that the kunai picked was the wrong one, yet, to avoid being at odds with the group, went ahead and picked it anyway. Yamanaka Ino was an impressionable 12-year-old girl who would soon graduate and become a shinobi. This was true, but she was also the daughter of Konoha's foremost psychologist, who was the head of Konohagakure's torture and interrogation department. She was the friend of a genius with an IQ of 200 that occasionally made rare quips and comments that belied his extraordinary intelligence, despite his outwardly lazy persona. Then, she was the heiress of a clan that could casually stroll through your mind like a schoolboy galloping a field of flowers and make your tongue unleash your deepest desires, even without using their clan techniques. As such, Yamanaka Ino knew exactly what to do. Slamming her hand on her desk, she twirled her hair, placed her hand on her hip, and let out a huff, utterly turning away from Kiba's question. Kiba's eyes narrowed. So it's not that you don't want to take the credit. You just wanted us to make you think you didn't care. You were pretending all along, weren't you? Whatever makes you happy, mutt breath. Why you? Mizuki-sensei clapped. That's enough. Kiba, if you have any problem with Ino, take it out in taijutsu practice. Assuming you can. A collection of snickers went up at the room at the slight. It was one time, Mizuki-sensei. I lost to her one time. Yamanaka Ino did not focus on any of this, however. Instead, her mind found itself begrudgingly drifting towards someone with blonde hair and blue eyes. Why had Naruto suddenly asked her out if he was supposed to be infatuated with Sakura? Had he known what she was up to and then did it to save her face? Was that why she found herself questioning her infatuation with Sasuke now and then? She had doubted Shikamaru's words before about Naruto being different, adding up to another time the pineapple-haired Nara had been right, and Kami knew that if Shikamaru wasn't so lazy, half of their conversations would be filled with, "I told you so." Still, it just didn't seem to fit. If Naruto was changed, why was he the dead last? Did graduating and becoming a shinobi not matter to his interests? She found herself biting on the edge of her pen and took in a deep breath. It seemed like she knew what she was going to do after school today, solving the enigma that was Uzumaki Naruto. Assuming she could find him. What was the difference between intelligence and wisdom? This was the question Yamanaka Inoichi asked himself as he plopped down on his couch, a tired sigh escaping his lips and a long worn furrow etched on his brow, having just concluded a long day at the office. Some would argue that intelligence was about possessing knowledge. An intelligent person might have the savoir-faire across numerous different fields, like someone who had memorized vast portions of a thesaurus, or who could calculate complex mathematical figures on the fly. Wisdom, on the other hand, they might say, was the ability to apply that knowledge in the right scenarios to achieve the best outcomes. Except, that wasn't entirely accurate. That describes the relationship between intelligence and wisdom, not the distinction. In truth, intelligence and wisdom were somewhat separate entities. One could be wise, like an enlightened monk or spiritual leader, yet lack conventional intelligence, such as monks who might not know how to read or write. Similarly, a person could be highly intelligent, possessing a great depth of knowledge about various subjects, yet not necessarily wise. For instance, consider a scientist who meticulously planned extremely nutritious meals for his children and prevented them from eating sweets due to the health risks. Yet, he failed to see that his children might never understand his reasoning. Unfortunately, it seems that people often value intelligence more highly than wisdom. Konoha was gradually running out of wise young shinobi, and instead, they were breeding geniuses. If only his beloved village could have a Sarutobi Hiruzen for every Uchiha Itachi and Hitaki Kakashi, it would be so much better off. Unfortunately, most levels of wisdom came with experience, and as such, those greatly in need of it sorely lacked the access to it. Shameful as it was, Inoichi knew full well that his village was filled with people lacking both intelligence and wisdom. Most obviously would be the civilians first, who would willingly let their children sign up to the academy, fooled by the romanticized ideal of the Konoha Shinobi Corps. They were nothing but glorified child soldiers capable of taking on full-grown men twice their size, but child soldiers no less. Most of them would not live to hit 30, and those who did would be so scarred by the things that they had witnessed and performed, that they could never live normally ever again. But the will of fire burned strong. How strong it burned indeed. Fire was the one thing most capable of bringing unlimited destruction to leaves, yet not a soul had noted the irony. Konoha's head of T&I shook his head as he let out a deep sigh. The question and deliberations had not struck him on some utterly odd whim, and he was not usually someone to start thinking about such topics, but perhaps the reason the question had struck him had been because he had been watching his daughter recently. Ino was his pride and joy, and of course, he had done his best to lavish his little princess the way any father would, but he made sure he never cosseted her too much, especially if she wanted to be a kunoichi. He was initially adamant against her decision to even enroll, but he had no choice. Had his daughter said she wanted to become a horticulturist or a botanist or a psychologist rather than a kunoichi, not a single soul in the world, dead or alive, legend or nightmare, would have been capable of forcing him to tell her otherwise. But of course, his daughter wanted to be a kunoichi. He had no choice left but to respect her decision or lose her love and respect forever. Despite training to be a powerful, lethal weapon, she was still a young girl though, and as such, he had been more than happy when she showed the signs of her youth, such as an adolescent crush. His only wish was that Ino would have at least picked a crush that was not so mentally scarred, but in the end, he had left her to her own devices. Until now, he had begun noticing in the past 4 weeks how much his little princess was changing. There had been a little bit more interest in the way she listened to his tales at the office, and as he explained to her bits and pieces of the psychology that people took for granted. Then of course, the frequency at which she mentioned the Uchiha's name had hit a sudden decline. Whereas he could have previously counted a minimum of 16 counts per day, it had dropped to a mere 5, and each time the topic was brought up, she bit her lips, her eyes furrowed, and her nose rose, just a smidgen. Something or someone had made her re-evaluate her infatuation, and she was inwardly conflicted. He would usually leave the issues of boys to her mother to handle, not because he was inept, but rather because he felt there would be more of a bond between his wife and his daughter discussing over such sensitive feminine issues. Of course, when she began leaving the house and returning each day, looking more tired and frustrated than the previous, he decided to intervene. "Ino-chan, is there anything bothering you that you want to tell me?" She had pursed her lips. Well, her hesitation alone was not a good sign. "I did something, I think I did something, to someone. That might have been kind of bad, and I've been trying to find them to apologize, or explain, or something, but..." Inoichi eased her. "Calm down, Ino-chan, go gently, from the start." She frowned. "What do you do when someone just changes? Does things they've never done before? Or if their actions don't match what you know about them. Inoichi rose an eyebrow. Is this about a boy? Ino sighed. Yes, Daddy. Ino, I've never really supported your crush on Uchiha Sasuke, but if he's the reason for why you've been so emotionally frustrated. It's not about Sasuke. Those words threw Inoichi for a loop, his mind recoiling as it tried to wrap itself around that information. First, there had been no affectionate suffix added to the name, and second, his daughter had another crush that wasn't the mentally perturbed survivor of the Uchiha clan massacre. It's not. Then who? It's Naruto. That suddenly. Inoichi's mind slammed the brakes hard at that point. Naruto. As in, Uzumaki Naruto. The resident prankster of Konoha. The secret orphaned son of the Yondaime Hokage. The current container for Kyuubi no Yoko, the strongest of all tailed beasts that had ravaged Konoha 12 years ago. Nope. 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 Why? Why couldn't this be easy? Why couldn't his daughter just be interested in some no-named average boy? He would have taken a boy with greased hair that wore 20 types of leather and a "I heart mom" tattoo plastered on his left shoulder, over him. He had no personal bias against the boy, but he did have a personal interest to keep his daughter safe no matter what, and unfortunate as it was, merely being a Jinchuriki put him on the list of people to get Ino as far away from as possible. He did not fear the boy going out of control, for he trusted the Yondaime's sealing ability, but the sheer power he wielded would put him in the crosshairs of powerful and dangerous individuals. Individuals that he did not want 1,000 feet near his daughter. He needed to defuse this situation very carefully. Ino-chan, you said Naruto suddenly did what now? He asked me out. What? I know. That was my reaction too. He's spent half of the time in the academy pestering Sakura for dates, and she turns him down, and then all of a sudden, he just asks me. Why? Why all of a sudden and then the way he did it? She abruptly stopped, and Inoichi's eyes narrowed. There was information that his daughter was intentionally keeping out of the discussion. Anyway, Shika says that it's because Naruto is actually really observant when he's dealing with things that catch his interest. He did. Inoichi knew that Nara Shikamaru was just as astute as his father, perhaps even more so, but he was lacking in the much-needed wisdom that would probably make him surpass Shikaku. He did, but it doesn't make sense. If he's so observant about stuff, why do his grades suck so much and why is he the dead last? Inoichi swore under his breath. Champing breadsticks. If what Ino was telling him was true, then there were two possible unfortunate implications, neither of which was comforting, and both of which constituted as threats or serious issues to Konoha's safety. The first implication was that Uzumaki Naruto was intentionally downplaying all his skills and abilities, for whatever possible reason, and depending on how observant he truly was, it was more than likely that he knew who his father was, and what was sealed inside of his stomach, yet opted to keep it to himself. When children found themselves out of their depth or seeking knowledge or wisdom, they looked to adult authorities for guidance and explanation. If Uzumaki Naruto was aware of his true heritage, and of the reasons of the numerous bias against him, and the fact that a giant beast was sealed inside his gut yet had intellectually chosen not to mention it or blurt it out, and continued as though absolutely nothing was wrong, then there was a problem. From a psychological standpoint it was downright terrifying, and it marked him as a greater flight risk than Uchiha Sasuke ever could be. The second implication, of course, was somewhat lighter, and it meant that there were serious levels of bias against the boy, and he was more than likely being either taught wrongly, or intentionally failed in order to ensure that he did not graduate. It meant that there were shinobi amongst the ranks who had let personal bias interfere with objective judgment, and they needed to be sanctioned and undergo screening to see if they were truly worthy of being in the shinobi corps. After all, if you let your emotions bleed into your job when all you did was to teach, who is to say that on a mission, you would not choose to let your emotions take sway and then instead of assassinating a target, you let them escape? Of course, if Uzumaki Naruto was being taught wrongly, would he not have complained? Or was it that he was unaware of the fact? But if he was unaware of the fact, that brought his supposed perceptive prowess into question. Daddy, you're making that constipated face again. God damn it, Shikaku. He sighed. Having that man as a best friend for the greater half of his life had made him paranoid and caused him to analyze things more than was sometimes needed. For all he knew, Shikaku's son was wrong, And Uzumaki Naruto was not some overly perceptive genius mastermind intentionally hiding his skills in order to be severely underestimated by the Konohan populace whilst he plotted revenge for being ostracized, orphaned and denied his legacy. Alright Ino-chan, if you want answers, find Naruto and invite him over to dinner. I can't. I've been searching everywhere for him for the past 4 weeks and I still can't find him. Oh dear. He skips out on the academy. Daddy, it'd be easier to count the number of days he's been in class than the number he's been outside of it. Oh no. And no one knows where he goes. No one questions what he's been doing with all that extra time he spends outside of class. Inoichi took a deep breath. It seemed he would be scheduling a meeting with the Hokage soon. Alert. Path Quest. Quest title. Mastery of the Clone Jutsu. Objectives. Increase chakra control skill to level 10. Or, remove chakra imbalance status. Description. Hinata and Tenten have offered their assistance to help player Naruto achieve proficiency in the Clone Jutsu, a fundamental skill for graduation from the academy. Closing square bracket. Rewards. Skill. Academy Clone Jutsu. Failure. Fail graduation from academy. Dash question mark. Dash question mark. Action required. Acceptance or declination of quest. Naruto, Hinata, and Tenten stood in the training grounds. So, I'm supposed to walk up the tree. Naruto's skepticism was evident in his voice. And this is supposed to help my control so I can make a clone. Yes. You coat the soles of your feet with a small amount of chakra, allowing them to stick to the surface of whatever you're walking on at that moment. Tenten paused, then added, or if not your feet, then whatever you currently need to affix to the surface. For example, if you wanted to hide in the shadows of a dark corner, you could coat your back with chakra and literally stick yourself to the wall. Chakra can do that? He questioned, his tone still doubtful. Chakra can do many things that normally wouldn't be possible. It isn't only used to create genjutsu and ninjutsu, Tenten thought to herself. She addressed his disbelief aloud, surely you have seen ninja in the village running up the sides of buildings and jumping across rooftops. Well, yeah, Naruto admitted. But I always thought they just moved their legs so quick they were able to run up the walls. I didn't know about the chakra sticking thing. Tenten nodded in acknowledgement, understanding his assumption. She redirected their focus to the training at hand. Now, you must learn the proper amount of chakra to use. Use too much and it will cause a backfire, throwing you away from the surface you're trying to adhere to. However, use too little and it won't be enough to withstand your weight, and you will slip off. She briefly glanced at him to ensure he was keeping up with her explanation. Many people believe the best way to perform this training exercise would be to run up the tree and mark the highest point you reach with a kunai, but I believe this to be counterproductive. She made a hand motion indicating for him to come to the tree she was standing next to. The goal of the surface climbing exercise is not to reach the top of the tree, but to learn how to properly adhere yourself to a solid vertical surface and to assist in learning to control your chakra. Now, Hinata is going to demonstrate for you before I want you to try. Watch carefully. Tenten motioned for Hinata to come forward. Hinata, trying to calm her heart, placed one leg on the tree and began walking up the surface. She stopped halfway up the tree and turned before walking back down. Wow, that was amazing, Hinata-chan. Naruto praised, giving her a wide smile. Hinata's enthusiastic compliments never failed to make her feel good inside. Thankfully, I'm getting much better at concealing my blush over the past few weeks, she thought, grateful for her progress. It was a large adjustment for her, since she wasn't used to people giving positive reinforcement of her abilities and skill level. The best her father or clan elders would ever give her was adequate. Now, Tenten started, suppressing a smile at his praise. You couldn't actually see it without the use of a bloodline like Hinata's Byakugan, but she used a small amount of chakra to stick to the tree as she climbed. What you also didn't see was her reinforce her body with a very small amount of chakra to counter the gravity that would have attempted to pull down her upper body. When you first start this training, you will have to consciously be aware of this. However, after a while, your body will learn to instinctively counter gravity's pull no matter the angle of the surface you're standing on. Tenten paused, letting him absorb the information. Even Hinata listened intently, as she herself hadn't been aware of this, she just trained as she was told. Naruto nodded, signaling he understood, prompting Tenten to continue. This is another reason why I believe you should slowly walk up the tree. If you were to run, you wouldn't get the full benefit of this body conditioning. Now, I want you to try. Tenten and Hinata watched as Naruto approached the tree and stared down at his right foot, placing it flush against the tree. Immediately, his leg recoiled away as he was propelled to the ground. Damn it! Naruto's frustration echoed through the area as he clambered back to his feet, a cloud of dust billowing around him from the force of the impact. Rubbing his behind and trying to salvage some dignity, he muttered, "Guess I used too much, huh?" Tenten nonchalantly agreed, her arms crossed as she watched him. Try again. You already know you need to create a clone for the Genin test, which is a little more than a month away. So, you'll need to be able to do this. Her voice was firm, pushing him to grasp the basics that eluded him. As Naruto squared up to the tree again, but instead of the repulsion that had sent him flying before, this time his foot merely slipped, thwarting his ascent before it even began. It seems gravity is not on my side today, he thought, grimacing at his misfortune. I think you need some motivation, Tenten mused aloud, a mischievous glint in her eye as she reached for her kunai pouch. Hey, what you got there? Naruto asked, a hint of nervousness lacing his words as he eyed the sharp objects in Tenten's hand. Motivations, she declared, a sly smile creeping across her face. Now start climbing, you orange monkey. It was early, ridiculously so, as the sun was just peeking through the horizon, and the atmosphere was still chilly and filled with morning dew. Despite this, the Sandaime Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen, was in his office quite earlier than most. This was because he had a meeting scheduled earlier than normal, but he would not deny that upon hearing that Yamanaka Inoichi had requested a meeting, he was expecting a more serious topic than that of Naruto. Still, he would give Inoichi the benefit of the doubt. Considering the extenuating circumstances, it was not entirely the first time a clan head had approached him about the blonde. What do you know about Uzumaki Naruto? Sarutobi Hiruzen would have found this question odd, and then laughed at anyone who actually had the impetus to ask him such a question. Except, when it came from one of his most trusted shinobi, and the appointed leader of his T&I department, then it became another issue entirely. He responded what he knew about the boy, his parents, his background, and of course, the secret that was sealed into him. What do you know about Uzumaki Naruto personally? With that question came some guilt, as he had not invested much time into the boy's life and affairs, but what he did know, was that the boy had a fondness for ramen, a penchant for pranks, was often loud and boisterous and wished to become the Hokage of Konoha. What else? What else? Well, that is, the Sandaime Hokage of Konoha found his lips furrowing into a sad thin line. That was, as a matter of fact, all he did know about the boy. Hokage-sama, what if I told you that those qualities you mentioned are what everybody knows about him, and nothing else? Hiruzen's nose rumpled. What? Yesterday, Hokage-sama, I met with his Chunin Academy instructors, and before that, I met with a select few of his classmates, and likewise still before that, I met the owners of the Tyuki ramen stand. All of them, every last one, when I asked them to tell me what they knew about Uzumaki Naruto, they recounted these exact same three things. Yamanaka Inoichi raised 3 fingers. He loves ramen. 1 finger down. He likes pranking. Another finger down. He wants to become the Hokage. The Sandaime Hokage placed his hands on his desk as he gave Inoichi a stern but contemplating look. Had this been anyone else other than Yamanaka Inoichi, he would have stopped listening and waved off their concerns on accounts of blatant paranoia and some hidden bias against Naruto. However, Yamanaka Inoichi had known Namikaze Minato, and the two blondes had been friends and comrades, to the point in which they had sometimes worked on the same team. Even more, Inoichi had also known Uzumaki Kushina, and the man was definitely not someone who would ever have any form of bias against her son, somewhat considering the fact that just as Uchiha Makoto had supposedly possessed some childish infatuation with Minato during their academy days, so had Inoichi possessed the same with Kushina. Not that the Hokage listened to or cared about such things, as it was merely the freedom of youth. I do not see where the problem lies, Inoichi. The problem, Hokage-sama, is that we are human beings, not one-dimensional cardboard cutouts. It is impossible for one person to only have 3, in just 3 features about him that makes him memorable, to only have 3 aspects to his personality and character. Inoichi shook his head. To put this into perspective, Hokage-sama, what does Uzumaki Naruto do when he is neither pranking people, nor eating ramen, nor declaring his desire to steal your hat? Where does he go? How does he spend his time outside of classes when neither pranking nor eating? What does he do after a long and exhausting day? The answers to those three questions were all equally unknown, and it dawned on the Sandaime just how little he truly knew about the young boy named Naruto, who looked up to him with stars in his eyes as though he was Kami's best gift. Yet, Sandaime knew that he had failed Naruto more than he had helped him. He let out a tired sigh. His age was rapidly catching up to him, and he knew and believed that he had tried to do his best for not only the village, but also for the son of his successor. Everyone Minato knew that was capable of taking care of Naruto was not available. Hitaki Kakashi was a mess, psychologically speaking. After the loss of his teammates, he retreated into Anbu and took only the toughest of missions of the S-ranked caliber, and it was clear that he possessed some sort of death wish. He clearly could not leave the upbringing of a child to him. Jiraiya was far too busy maintaining Konoha's spy networks, or at least, so he claimed, as his job did include him traveling from place to place, drinking in bars and taverns and peeping on women in hot springs. Of course, even if he was not basically a wanderer, the Sandaime could not in good conscience leave Jiraiya all alone to raise a child. Tsunade would have been perfect, but she was now an alcoholic and gambling addict lost to her own grief, and he would not want her raising an impressionable young child either. Uchiha Makoto had once offered, but the clan politics were against such a thing, as the Uchiha clan had just been accused of the ones masterminding the Kyuubi's attack in the first place. It would be tremendously bad if one of their own had then decided to adopt the boy. The Hyuga were out of the question, and part of his village they might be, but Hiruzen had never appreciated or favored a clan that could and would so callously brand their own family members as slaves in the name of preserving and protecting a bloodline. Such a place was not where he wanted Naruto to grow up, believing that such practices were the norm. The Aburame once again offered, but it was likewise impossible as at the time, the Kyuubi's chakra and presence made their Kikaichu bugs scared and wary, and of course, there was the issue of Naruto eventually growing up to feel like an outsider, as he vastly contrasted the majority of the Aburame. The ideal clans would have either been the Nara, the Yamanaka, the Akamichi or the Inuzuka. However, there was once again the question of allowing a single clan that much power. It was not viewed as a clan attempting to train and foster the son of their hero, rather, as a clan potentially raising and shifting the loyalty of a Jinchuriki away from the village and into their own hands. And so, Naruto had grown up unloved and uncared. Hokage-sama. The aged man was drawn from his musing, and he shook his head, letting out a long sigh. I believe we should let sleeping dogs lie, Inoichi. What? If you are worried about Naruto-kun's loyalty, I can personally assure you that Naruto is loyal to Konoha without measure. I can see it in his eyes, in his movements. He would be the last person in the world to betray Konoha. But Hokage-sama, this is my final decision, Inoichi. For Kami's sakes, let the boy be. Once he graduates from the academy, then you can conduct whatever tests you wish during his psych evaluations. Yamanaka Inoichi let out a deep sigh, and Hiruzen watched as the man gave a salute. Hi, Hokage-sama. Now is there anything else you wanted to speak to me about? Nothing of any real value, Hokage-sama. Except to perhaps look into the academy instructors to find if indeed there are Chunin intentionally sabotaging student scripts. Hiruzen slowly rubbed his beard. He knew that there was always that possibility, for Chunin instructors to be visibly biased against Naruto, but he had hoped that it would be of a minuscule level of simply asking him more questions in class rather than giving him unfair grades. He could not go out and start rooting every Chunin that was biased against a single student, otherwise that would make it appear as though he was the one being biased against them. Alright, I'll have an Anbu team look into it. Anything else? No, Hokage-sama. Dismissed. The leader of the only naturally blonde-haired clan in the entirety of Konoha nodded, and utilized the body flicker technique to leave Hiruzen's office, making the aged Hokage sigh once more as he leaned into his desk. It had only been a month since he had seen Naruto, and he had not seen or heard from the boy at all on any other occasion. He knew he was busy, and he knew that he also had to think of the lives of the other villagers and of his shinobi, but Naruto was simply that breath of fresh air that was perhaps often needed. Of course, there was also the small, disconcerting part of him that realized that what Inoichi said was somewhat true, as he knew very little about what Naruto did or where he went to in his free time. He was about to call the Anbu, but he stopped halfway before he did so, and let a small contemplative smile come on his lips instead. Rather than summon Naruto into his office, it was best to make it into a surprise. He swung on his coat and hat, placed his pipe into his mouth, and then prepared himself to move forward and once more allow the professor to grace the streets of Konoha. Meanwhile, the hidden Anbu guards of Konoha followed the Hokage from the shadows, except for one particular Anbu who left something behind in the office, a bug. The bug eventually took off into the sky, flying low and free from the threat of birds, before eventually landing on the hand of a certain individual. What does it say? Yamanaka Inoichi believes the Kyuubi Jinchuriki could constitute a flight risk due to how little is truly known about him. Danzo-sama must hear about this. The two figures gave each other a nod, before vanishing once more, unseen and unheard, as phantoms in dawn. Unbeknownst to Naruto, his actions had set something much larger in motion, like a spark that flutters into the dry underbrush of a forest. This spark, innocent and unnoticed at first, had the potential to ignite a firestorm that could sweep across Konoha. Would this burgeoning flame bring warmth and light to the village, or would it evolve into a raging inferno, consuming everything in its path? Only time would tell whether Konoha would bask in the glow of this fire or be scorched by its fury. Hiruzen Sarutobi was feeling the weight of his years more acutely these days. As the Hokage of Konoha, his responsibilities were vast, and they seemed to grow heavier with each passing day. That was why he cherished his rare moments of leisure, when he could wander through the village like an ordinary elder, enjoying the respectful bows of villagers and the curious glances of fellow ninjas. He was making his way slowly towards Naruto's apartment, planning a surprise visit. The gentle sounds of daily life in Konoha provided a soothing backdrop as he strolled. Suddenly, his peaceful reverie was interrupted by a loud boom. Hiruzen's heart skipped a beat, his old warrior instincts kicking in. He pinpointed the sound almost instantly. It was coming from Naruto's apartment. With a swift motion, more agile than one might expect from his aged frame, Hiruzen leapt onto Naruto's balcony. The sight that greeted him made his jaw drop. Naruto was in a fighting stance, reminiscent of the academy style but distinctly more refined. Hiruzen's sharp eyes caught the subtle glow of chakra around Naruto's ankles, a brilliant, pulsing blue that seemed to store an immense chakra. No way, Hiruzen thought, his mind racing as he watched Naruto vanish in a blur, reappearing instantly in front of a training dummy. The force of Naruto's punch was colossal, reminiscent of a young Tsunade. The dummy didn't just fall apart, it exploded, straw and fabric bursting outward like a firework display of destruction. As Naruto sighed and reached for another dummy from his storage scroll, he finally noticed Hiruzen. "Oh, Gigi, what are you doing here? Wait, you're on my balcony, that means." Naruto's expression shifted from surprise to accusation as he pointed at Hiruzen. "You are a peeping Tom." "What?" Hiruzen could barely conceal his surprise. "Naruto, I am not a peeping." Hiruzen paused, the words were true, but no one needed to know that, and then continued, "Tom. Okay then, why are you on my balcony? I heard the exploding sound and jumped to check if you were okay," Hiruzen explained, his concern genuine. Naruto smiled in response. "Don't worry, I'm just training." "About that, how did you do that?" "Oh, you mean my punch." Naruto's voice was casual as he explained, "So, I was practicing my tree walking last night." Tree walking? Hiruzen's mind raced. Was someone training Naruto outside the academy? Jiraiya was nowhere near Konoha, Kakashi was scared to approach Naruto, and most of the village's ninjas wouldn't dare train the Jinchuriki. It couldn't be that man, could it? "So, I fell down," Naruto continued, snapping Hiruzen out of his thoughts. "And I was just laying there when I noticed I'd left a hole in the bark. I thought, why not combine that with my taijutsu? And here's the result." Naruto held up the dummy's head in his palms, and as Hiruzen watched, a surge of chakra escaped Naruto's hands. The energy enveloped the dummy's head, causing it to compress like a squeezed orange. Within seconds, the pressure became too great, and the head burst apart, fragments of straw and cloth shooting out in all directions. Hiruzen couldn't suppress a laugh as he watched Naruto's expression twist into one of annoyance. "Why are you laughing, old man?" "No, If I had a nickel for every time someone used chakra control to gain explosive strength, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice, Hiruzen explained, amused by the odd coincidence. Naruto looked puzzled, not quite following. Do you know who Tsunade is? Naruto snapped his fingers a few times as if trying to place the name. Legendary medical ninja, he finally said. Yes, she was my student, Hiruzen said, pride tinged his voice. Really? Yes, well, when she was a genin, she sucked at chakra control, Hiruzen chuckled. But she's a medical ninja, Naruto pointed out, confused. Not everyone starts off at the top, Naruto. Yes, she grew up to be a legendary medical ninja, but when she was a genin, she sucked at chakra control because she was from the Senju clan. She actually used the same chakra control failure phenomenon to create her signature super strength. I think it's a similar phenomenon, but both of you have a different approach to it. Tsunade made her chakra control so strong that she could actually regulate this phenomenon to boost her overall strength, and you are expelling chakra out explosively to create a powerful current of force, Hiruzen explained, hoping to spark a realization in Naruto. Can I meet her? Naruto asked eagerly. Hiruzen sighed, a hint of melancholy in his voice. She isn't in the village, Naruto. Lame, Naruto grumbled. Naruto, Hiruzen began, taking a more serious tone. Yeah, how are you able to use the taijutsu of the Senju clan? Hiruzen asked, curiosity piqued by the boy's unusual abilities. Naruto paused, his face blank as panic surged inside him. He quickly glanced at the system, his mind racing. Skill: Senju clan taijutsu, Flash Fist. Level 1. Description: a taijutsu style developed by the Senju clan, focusing entirely on speed to create a fighting style that counters the rival Uchiha clan's Sharingan. The swift movements are designed to be too fast for even the Sharingan to track and copy, making it an effective combat technique against their historical adversaries. Closing square bracket. Passive enhancements. Increased speed, boosts movement speed and reaction speed by 25%. Closing square bracket. Active boosts. Flash step. A concentrated burst of chakra from the user's ankles enables high-speed movement, allowing them to close in on opponents or escape from tight situations rapidly. Closing square bracket. Fuck, what do I do? What do I say? I just unlocked this skill. In a swift decision, Naruto activated Spirit Possession, steadying his voice as he asked, would you like to come inside? The way he spoke was noticeably different, calm, composed, almost detached. It was as if someone else was speaking through him. Guess Sherlock is influencing me more than I realized, Naruto mused internally, noticing Hiruzen's puzzled expression. Hiruzen blinked, caught off guard. Sure. As Naruto led the way, Hiruzen caught a glimpse of something in Naruto's eye, a flash of what seemed like the sharp intelligence of Shikaku, the commander of the Jonin Council. Hiruzen shook his head, dismissing the thought as he followed Naruto inside. Do you want some tea, Gigi? Naruto asked, reverting to his usual tone and demeanor. Hiruzen chuckled softly to himself. Maybe the stress was indeed getting to him. After all, there was no way Naruto, of all people, could have intelligence rivaling Shikaku. Most members of the Nara clan couldn't match that man's intellect. Perhaps Inoichi's recent paranoia-filled musings were influencing his judgment more than he realized. Hiruzen entered the house, removing his shoes beforehand. He crossed the spotless floor, peering into the kitchen at the neatly organized dishes on the washing rack. You've been taking care of yourself, I see. Hiruzen looked around Naruto's modest living space as the young ninja spoke, his gaze landing on an old game console he had given Naruto some time ago. You still have that? He asked, a touch of surprise in his voice. Yeah, I use it from time to time. I played a round or two with Hinata and Tenten, Naruto replied as he moved toward the kitchen. Hiruzen's thoughts were interrupted by a memory of Inoichi's words about no one really knowing the real Naruto. It's not that Naruto is hiding anything, it's that we never managed to see past the loudmouth prankster who wanted to be Hokage, Hiruzen realized, his eyes wandering from the small garden to the poetry books on the table, then to the small TV and the gaming console. Naruto is as complex as any of us, yet we've reduced him to a few simplistic labels. He loves ramen. He likes pranking. He wants to become the Hokage. Naruto re-entered the room, carrying a tray with a teapot, 2 mugs, and a dozen Biscuits, an unusual combination, Hiruzen noted, but intriguing nonetheless. Naruto, Hiruzen prompted, encouraging the boy to continue as he took a biscuit. I reverse-engineered the Senju Taijutsu style, Naruto declared, causing Hiruzen to blink in surprise. How? Simple, I read up on how the Senju fought, like the Uchiha, and most of those battles talked about how fast the Senju were, especially Tobirama and Hashirama. I figured since the Academy Taijutsu is just a watered-down version of their fighting styles, something must have been missing for the Taijutsu to be watered down, Naruto explained, his tone growing more boisterous. Hiruzen snorted. Watered down, not boarded, Naruto. Naruto laughed, spirit possession subtly influencing everything from his speech to his posture, even the jokes he made, all designed to keep Hiruzen from growing suspicious. So, I just needed speed, I theorized. And the fastest jutsu I had was the substitution jutsu, so I combined the two. Judging by your reaction, I reinvented the Senju clan taijutsu, didn't I, Gigi? You sure did, Hiruzen said, quickly gulping down some hot tea to mask his astonishment. I made a mistake underestimating you, Naruto. You truly are on the path to becoming the Hokage, he thought warmly. I forgot to ask, but what about the tree climbing? Hiruzen inquired. Oh, I was training with Tenten to get better control over my chakra so I can perform the clone jutsu and finally graduate, Naruto answered. Hiruzen sighed in relief, glad that Naruto wasn't being secretly trained by someone like Danzo. It was just Naruto, being his inventive self. With a bright grin, Naruto looked up at Hiruzen and asked, Gigi, don't you think I deserve a reward? Hiruzen chuckled, amused by Naruto's cheeky demeanor. Sure, what do you want? Ramen. A jutsu maybe. Naruto's grin widened, but his eyes held a hint of serious curiosity. I have this burning question inside me. Can you answer it? What's the question? Naruto frowned and clenched his jaw. I want to know what's so special about me. What do you mean? You visit me every month. Just me. There are so many orphans in the village but I'm the only one you personally give their stipend. Why? And there was the crux of the matter. Hiruzen shrank back at the pleading light in Naruto's eyes. He could not tell Naruto the truth. Not yet, but if he were to lie to him, the trust he had managed to build over the last few years would burn to ash. Unfortunately, his duty as Hokage superseded his guilt. You certainly don't ask easy questions, Hiruzen said. As for your monthly stipend, what can I say? You are a special boy. He eked out a laugh, reaching to ruffle his hair. Unconcealed hurt flashed across Naruto's face and Hiruzen's hand froze halfway across the table, the distance between them felt greater. All right then. He reached within the folds of his robes and slid 1,000 ryo across the table. I think you also deserve this as your reward. Make sure it lasts. He turned to leave as quickly as possible, swallowing thickly as the door slammed behind him. The setting sun's orange and purple hues lit the sky. Nebulous, dark clouds curved around the village while looming shadows crept after Hiruzen. Their cries of, "Have a good evening," or, "Hello, Lord Hokage," fell on deaf ears. He was locked in conflict with his guilt. It was a raging sea storm, with waves that rose and crashed against his flimsy resolve. Like he would a dinghy, all he could do was hold firm against its cracked wooden edges, praying that it remained steadfast. He cursed Danzo's name again. It felt hollow to him, though. Danzo may have been responsible for the villagers ostracizing the boy, but the blame for Naruto's ignorance landed squarely on his shoulders. But as per usual, Hiruzen would lament. He would suffer in silence, perhaps even break out a case of sake if it became too much to bear sober. Because Naruto could not know the truth, not yet. Spirit possession has been deactivated. Naruto's eyes were fixed on Hiruzen's cup as he took a deep breath. Discovering his ties to the Uzumaki clan had answered so many of his questions, yet it seemed to unravel even more mysteries. The Uzumaki clan, October 10th. My birthmarks. Is it all connected to something greater? Naruto wondered silently. What is Gigi hiding from me that ties all these things together? He sighed, his gaze dropping to the biscuit in his hand. Absent-mindedly, he took a bite, his thoughts turning to the silent system in front of him. What about you? Got any answers for me? He asked, hopeful yet skeptical. The system remained silent. Of course, Naruto murmured, a hint of resignation in his voice. Like everyone else, you offer silence to my questions. Thank you for visiting Yamanaka Flowers, please come again. Ino sighed to herself as she watched the customer leave with a full bouquet in hand, the young man smiling vibrantly as it was obvious he was going to give them to someone special. No, not entirely obvious. Ino could simply tell, because of the way in which the man had eagerly yet unsurely strode into the shop, the way his eyes had roamed all over the flowers as he searched for the most beautiful ones, and the way he scratched his head and muttered under his breath over and over as to whether or not she would like this or like that. It hadn't taken her long to move over to the man and adeptly select the adequate mix and blend of roses that he had immediately smiled and possessed the expression on his face that said, "This is the one." She wished she had someone special who would give her flowers. She placed her hand on her chin over the counter, staring blankly at the passing people in the streets, her eyes wishing she would come upon a familiar lock of black hair, before her train of thought stopped, entirely unbidden. But, isn't that the same reason why you like Sasuke-tem? She couldn't help the annoyance that ran through her form. Every time she even thought about Sasuke, any single second that he was brought up in her mind, Naruto's words would strike down the thought with the vengeance and brutality of a Jonin assassinating an academy student. It was made even annoying because she had been unable to find or meet the person who had uttered them to her, for over an entire month now, and she had all but given up on the search. Naruto was still alive, that much was certain, and he would be at the academy again. Choji claimed that he had seen him with some bruises and a lot of dust as if he was repeatedly falling onto the ground, so all she had to do was wait, and try and re-evaluate the reasons why she liked Sasuke while conjuring up random theories as to why Naruto asked her out on a whim. She liked Sasuke because he looked good. That couldn't be all right. Well, it was mostly because he was mysterious and dark and had a deep, dark and troubled past. She slammed her head into the counter and let out a groan. No, that couldn't be it either. That'd be saying that she only liked him because he was broken and she wanted to fix his brokenness. That'd also be saying that if he was a happy, perky and normal person without a tortured past she'd have no interest in him at all, which just made her a horrible, horrible person. Her mind drew from the question of her crush and infatuation back to the knucklehead that had made her realize just how superficial it had been. She still pondered on what Shikamaru had told her, and tried to make some sense of whether or not Naruto really was different, or not. Looking back, his grades had always been below mediocre, and he only ever tried once or twice. She could recall in class when Mizuki-sensei would ask Naruto a simple question like, "What is chakra?" and he would respond, "Chakra is the stuff that lets us do cool jutsu," and be berated. People would laugh and call him an idiot. Naruto would simply smile and scoff and then boisterously claim that when he was Hokage, no one would need to answer such questions. Of course, that'd just make people laugh at him even more, tell him to pipe down, and dismiss his declarations without a second thought. Wait, now that she thought about it, he had skipped class the following 3 days after that event. Then there was the time he had lost in a spar to Kiba. His academy-style taijutsu was filled with so many holes and openings that people had once again laughed and mocked it, whereas Kiba used his clan's taijutsu to beat him, and then claimed that Naruto couldn't become Hokage if he barely knew how to fight. He didn't show up in class for about 3 weeks after that day. Was it a pattern, or was her father's overly paranoid nature beginning to seep into her own mind? She groaned and let out a tired breath. Her gaze turned to the door. I wish the knucklehead would just barge in and save me the headache. Shaking her head, she turned around to organize the remaining few flowers in the display behind her, only to hear the bell ring. Welcome to, oh, it's just you forehead. Ino was somewhat surprised when she did not hear the resounding shout or denial or comeback that was associated with the banter between herself and her rival, Sakura. The pink-haired, green-eyed girl seemed unusually subdued, making Ino's brow rise. Now that she thought about it, what was Sakura doing here? Their rivalry over their affection of Sasuke had been one of the things that had torn a huge wedge in their friendship, and invariably ended up making them enemies. As far as she knew, Sakura had stopped branching by her house and seeing her outside of class. Hey Ino, are you alright? Ino's eyebrow furrowed. I'm perfectly fine. An uncomfortable silence stretched between them, in which Sakura seemed to be contemplating saying something, but was holding back, and Ino was slowly finding it grating on her nerves. So you just came to the shop for the first time in almost 3 years just to ask me that? What gives, Sakura? At this, the girl seemed to regard her warily. Ino, you still like Sasuke-kun, right? The Yamanaka heiress had her lips somewhat thinning as the question was brought up, especially considering the fact that she had been debating the issue herself. Where's this coming from? It was at that gesture that Sakura seemed to explode. You've not been yourself, Ino. For the past 1 month. You don't even look in Sasuke-kun's direction anymore or pay any attention to him. Whenever the girls are talking about him, you just go excuse yourself and leave. Then last week in class, you sat next to him the entire day, but you didn't even look at him once. That sounded like news to her. I sat next to Sasuke. Sakura looked appalled. You didn't even notice. No, she hadn't. Her thoughts had been apparently too preoccupied with other things, but how in the world had she managed to sit near him for an entire class without even turning in his direction? A month ago, if she sat next to the affection of her crush, she would be squealing and swooning and rubbing it in Sakura's face for the next 6 weeks at the very least. Now, it just seemed kind of pointless. Wait, just Sasuke. Not Sasuke-kun. Ino, what's going on? What's wrong with you? Nothing's wrong with me, Sakura. Sakura vehement in her denial. Something is wrong with you. You've been different ever since you lost that bet. You've been staring off into space, ignoring Sasuke-kun, and you've been stalking the baka of all people. You, Ino. She was unable to help the splutter of incoherent words that came out of her mouth at the accusation. I'm not stalking Naruto. Well, she technically wasn't. Stalking would assume that she was following him around, and that would work solely on the assumption that she could find him. What she had been doing was going to his most known or recently frequented locations, and then waiting for hours upon end to see if he would show up there. Wait, that wasn't stalking, was it? Sakura seemed to heavily disagree, shaking her head back and forth. You've changed, Ino. There was a small part of her that felt incredibly annoyed in the manner that Sakura had made that utterance. It was that part of her that could not absolutely stand for it, the part of her that was peeved at the manner in which Sakura had implied that her change was for the worse, as though she was the one in error. And why do you care? Sakura took a step back. What do you mean? We're fry. Sakura had stopped that sentence, realizing what she was going to say. No, we're not friends. Ino said, her voice dropping. We're not friends, remember? We ended our friendship years ago when we both realized we liked the same guy who still hasn't noticed us over 3 years later, so we're not friends. A thick cosseting silence blanketed over them, and green orbs met Violet, 2 eyes which had gone through the years, gazing at each other with companionship and closeness, drifted apart with jealousy, anger, rivalry, all over what? Ino found herself asking herself that question, now that she realized it. They had become rivals over what? They had sacrificed their friendship over what? Moments spent laughing in each other's company, grooming each other's hair, sharing everything they had, discussing fantasy weddings and magnificent white nights, envisioning themselves as princesses within each other's courts, caring, joking, smiling, all of it, sacrificed, replaced with vicious name-callings, arrogant remarks, violent outbursts and confrontations, for what? For Uchiha Bloody Sasuke. She had sacrificed the closest thing she had to a sister, for a boy's affection. How stupid was she? Ino, you didn't answer my question. You still like Sasuke-kun, right? She had taken 1 step forward. Right. Sakura's emerald eyes were almost glistening, searching, as though trying to convince herself of something, though Ino did not know what. What Yamanaka Ino did know, however, was certain. There are more important things in life than Uchiha Sasuke. Sakura recoiled, as though physically slapped. Her mouth opened, and then it closed, and then she shook her head. Sakura. The girl had not said a word as she departed from the store, and the door closed with a soft resounding click. Ino Yamanaka felt an urge to slam her head into the nearest wall. Really, this is your response? You won. I don't want Sasuke, I want my friend. Ino screamed inside her head. Her thoughts were a whirlwind of confusion and longing for the friendship that seemed to be slipping through her fingers. So why are you running? Can't we be friends? Ino's turbulent thoughts were abruptly halted by the sound of the door opening. She looked up and there he was, Takai. Ino had secretly been a fan of mystery novels, finding delight in unraveling the motives and actions of characters, placing herself in the shoes of both the protagonist and antagonist. 3 years ago, her interest had been piqued by a peculiar classmate who had entered the shop using the transformation jutsu. It was his attire that gave him away. His clothes were backward, a rookie mistake that screamed transformation jutsu to Ino's trained eyes. Furthermore, his attempt to disguise himself as someone distinctly not Sasuke, yet bearing a striking resemblance, had been almost comical. It was as if he thought adopting Sasuke's likeness would somehow achieve his objectives. But it was the name, Takai, that truly ensnared Ino's curiosity. A character from The Pillow Book, a novel she had read and adored. The coincidence, or was it deliberate, was too tantalizing for Ino to ignore. She was hooked, determined to uncover the identity of this enigmatic figure and his intentions. Perhaps he visits the shop with the secret hope of catching my eye, Ino mused, entertaining the idea that he might be a bashful boy who had taken on Sasuke's guise to draw her attention. But his actions, or lack thereof, belied such romantic notions. Each visit was the same: he'd enter, pick up whatever minor items he needed, and leave, without so much as a lingering glance in her direction. Ino's heart, craving the thrill of a hidden admirer, couldn't help but feel a touch of disappointment. Driven by curiosity and a dash of hopeful whimsy, Ino had attempted to uncover his true identity. Yet, every time she tried to follow him, he would disappear as completely as if he were a specter, leaving no trace of chakra or presence. He was like a ghost within the village, there one moment and gone the next, eluding her grasp. Once I thought you were Sasuke. I hoped that. Now, please be someone other than that emo bastard. Hey, Takai greeted, unloading an array of items onto the counter with a thud. Fertilizer, garden trowels, seed packets, and a few brightly colored flower pots formed a small mountain between them. He'd never bought this much before. That will be 1,500 ryo, she said, trying to mask her curiosity. The guy nodded, pulling out a quirky frog wallet, and handed over the money. Thank you for your purchase, Ino muttered, her voice devoid of its usual warmth. What's wrong? Takai asked, his concern genuine, which Ino found unexpectedly endearing. I don't know what to do with a problem I have, she confessed, more to herself than to him. Well, I try to just destroy the source, Takai suggested, a straightforward solution that made Ino chuckle internally. The idea of obliterating Sasuke from my concerns certainly brightened my mood. Thanks, she said, her gratitude genuine despite the simplicity of his advice. Then, to her surprise, Takai reached out and plucked a flower from one of the pots he'd just purchased, offering it to her with a slightly awkward gesture. Girls are happy when you give them flowers, right? He said, uncertainty lacing his words. What an adorable dork, Ino thought, a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth as she accepted the flower, touched by the gesture. As Takai turned to leave, Ino called out, hey. He paused, turning just in time to catch a bottle of perfume she tossed his way. I made that, she explained, a hint of pride in her voice. Try it and tell me what you think. Sure, I will try it. Datbeo, Takai responded, and for a brief moment, Ino's heart skipped a beat. That familiar catchphrase made her suspect the mysterious gardener was actually Naruto. But she quickly dismissed the thought as preposterous. Why would Naruto, of all people, have any interest in gardening? As soon as he was out of sight, Takai dashed into the alleyways, and with a small puff of smoke, he reverted back to his original form, Naruto. The sudden transformation might have baffled any onlooker, but, for Naruto, it was a simple yet ingenious solution to a persistent problem. Whenever he tried to shop for himself, whether it was for a cool book he spotted or some nice flowers to brighten up his apartment, he was either outright ignored or asked to leave. So, Naruto turned to the transformation jutsu, a technique he frequently used to blend in and get what he wanted without the hassle. It was a clever workaround, albeit a bit sad that he had to resort to such measures just to buy the simplest of things. Holding the bottle of perfume Ino had given him, Naruto took a sniff. This is nice. Sakura wasn't talking to her. The heiress of the Yamanaka clan had spent the first half of her weekend attempting to find her rival, only for the pink-haired girl to rebuff or shun her at every meeting. They'd met at the market, and Sakura turned the other way, acting as though she was in a brief hurry. She treated Ino like an awkward stranger or an estranged lover, creating an air of social gracelessness as Ino stood like a scorned lover whose advances had just been publicly rejected. At the park, Sakura's green eyes briefly met hers before she moved with the crowd of nameless, Uchiha-worshipping classmates. Her gaze rapidly averted as though something more important had come into her field of vision, like the daimyo had suddenly strolled by on an elephant, offering to take pink-haired girls as his brides. Ino had tried her usual brands of teasing insults or comments, and nothing had worked. Sakura had somehow become transcendent to the very barbs she would previously have been quick to shoot down. She was perfectly content to pretend as though Ino did not exist, as if the girl she bantered with on a daily basis was a ghost, unseen and unheard. In response, Ino had spent the next half of her weekend in an obsessed, infuriated frenzy, a work ethic and dedication that would have made certain spandex-wearing individuals completely enthralled, then mystified, worried, and finally, outright terrified. Sleep. What was sleep? What had it mattered to her? Food. Excellent, it would be the fuel to keep her moving. Rest. A four-letter word that had been ripped out of the pages of her dictionary, crumpled into a ball, and used as tinder to light the flames that spurred her forward and maximized her passion. It had not been hard to sneak out of her room when her father believed her asleep, and head to the nearest training ground. Her fists and kicks proceeded to turn the innocent dummies into splinters, hapless victims to her bubbling rage and frustration. So, Sakura had decided not to talk to her. That was fine, perfectly fine. She wouldn't even let Ino explain herself or her reason, or even give the tiniest of ideas as to what was wrong. It was perfectly fine. Ino, are you okay? The Yamanaka heiress drew from her musing as she entered the classroom. Monday morning had come too bright and far too early for her tastes. The birds at her windowsill sung in a manner that turned her brain to a deck of cards at the hands of a master shuffler. Her response had been to toss her comb with unerring accuracy until it smacked the creatures in the eye and told them that their musical performance was unwelcome. If that had not been enough, the sunlight pierced through her orbs as though a clan of divine giants had decided to attach a magnifying glass unto a torch powered by the collective chakra of 1,000 kage, and use said torch to blind little girls for fancy. A combination of her irritability and impatience did not detract her from the fact that there were indications of bangs under her eyes that her makeup kit had not been able to completely hide, and her hair possessed a brief frazzled intensity that would make it obvious that it had not been as meticulously treated as was the norm. Had Yamanaka Ino looked into the mirror, she would have set it ablaze and run screaming at the monstrosity that stood before her. Or, her reflection would have committed seppuku and saved both of them the misery. Do I look okay, Shikamaru? If this face was the last thing you saw at night, would you still be able to sleep? The boy beside her blinked, his visage clad in shock, his jaw slightly lowered, his eyes wide, as he blinked numerous times in rapid succession. I'm sorry, Shikamaru. I'm just a little tired, she said, letting out a brief sigh. You didn't get any sleep. He did not phrase it as a question. No, lying to Shikamaru was an exercise in futility. Problem with the boy was that when he wasn't being his usual extremely lazy self, he was damn perceptive, extremely much so that any slight indication or inflection would tip him off. Why? I was busy. Murdering wooden dummies with her fists and imagining them to be the form of a pink-haired acquaintance was rather time-consuming. Her eyes slowly strayed down to her fists, which were currently wrapped in bandages in the manner that taijutsu specialists did. Of course, the only reason for that was to hide the numerous bruises and cuts that were on the skin, which would have no doubt drawn attention from her father. Shikamaru's eyes trailed towards her hands, which made her clench them unconsciously. Then, he turned his gaze back into her eyes, and they stayed there for several seconds, as though searching for something. Judging, condemning, evaluating, analyzing, she could never exactly know what was running through the mind of the Nara when his gaze stopped resembling a sloth addicted to cough syrup. The gaze had stayed there for a few seconds, before, as always, the boy let out a drawled-out sigh. Troublesome. She rolled her eyes, in part to remove eye contact from Shikamaru, and in part as a response to the boy's usual remark. That's your reaction to everything. He shrugged, a lazy, half-hearted shrug in which his shoulders barely nudged upwards enough to be noticeable. It's because everything is. Everything is, she asked, her tone raising. Troublesome. Typical Shikamaru. You won't get far in life thinking like that, you know. I'll get far enough. She sighed, shaking her head. This back and forth exchange existed between them for a very long time, with her trying to get him to actually try for once, and him always refusing to budge. Ino paid no further heed to him, instead, turning her gaze to the door. She had arrived at school rather early after all, and other students were yet to arrive. Normally, she would have been watching the door in anticipation for a mop of shaggy blonde hair, but today, her interests lay elsewhere. Pink hair and green eyes entered into the class, chatting and chittering away with two fakers, friends, and her eyes managed to stray upwards, to the row of seats where Ino was. Saku. Again, her eyes flickered away as soon as their orbs made contact. Ino was left with her hand stretched out, her hopeful face slowly melting away, remnants of what was meant to be a beautiful meal now an indescribable, black smudge. Ino bit the bottom part of her lip, her fists clenching and unclenching as she could feel the heat building up at the back of her throat. "Why won't you talk to me?" She wanted to yell it out, and she could feel the words die, stillborn at the back of her throat, forcing her to swallow the residues of saliva that coalesced in her mouth, pushing painfully down her esophagus. Then, as always, black hair and brooding gaze strode through the doors. Hearing Sakura squeal out had never sounded so foreign, so annoying, so aggravating to Ino's ears before. She could feel her teeth begin to mash against each other as her nails, routinely polished, dug into her skin slowly. With each and every passing second the thumps of her heart began to grow louder and louder to her own ears. Her gaze zoomed in on the boy, who, as always, brushed aside Sakura, brushed aside her friend, as though she were a gnat not worthy of his attention for even a second. He regarded the insects he stepped on and the particles of dust in his path with more attention than he did her best friend. Sakura was her best friend. Yet, there the Uchiha went, not knowing, and not caring, about just what had transpired in the background in the name of gaining his attention. He sat, aloof as ever, unaware of just what had been lost and what had been cost by the people who pined over his attention, waiting day after day for him to as much as look at them. Ino. Look at them, goddammit. Just look at them. Ino, are you okay? Shikamaru called out her name, a trace of worry in the words that she did not pay heed to, as instead, she vibrated in her seat, and watched, as for the umpteenth time, the girls surrounded him and showered him with their wide-eyed affections and gifts, and all he ever did was to turn his face to the side, and let out that infuriating, exasperating HN. The class went silent as a palm smacked onto a desk loud enough to draw everyone's attention. Slowly, everyone's gaze turned to the form of Yamanaka Ino, as a portion of her hair covered her eyes from being seen, and some would note that as they did see those eyes, they were grim, heavy, and radiating with a cold, inexplicable blizzard. "Hey, Goldilocks, what's up with yo?" Her head snapped over to the class's resident delinquent figure, the Inuzuka boy flinching backward at the withering glare thrown his way, and the words he wanted to say died instantaneously in his throat. His puppy companion made small whining noises as it sunk further into Kiba's jacket, the boy himself wishing such was possible. She moved over from her seat, each step sounding louder and louder to everyone's ears, until she was in front of the desk of Uchiha Sasuke, the girls parting aside as a blanketing silence overcame all of them, as Sakura seemed to be looking at her again, but at this moment, Ino had a different target. She stood, gazing into the ebony eyes of the Uchiha, and for the first time in years, she could tell that Uchiha Sasuke was looking at her. She could not have been more pissed. Her entire form shivered, angry breaths came forth from her nostrils like she was a mythical beast of fire. Ino remembered Takae's words. Well, I try to just destroy the source. Yeah, she would destroy the source of all her problems. Eventually, she roared, "Fight me!" Silence begot greater silence. Her words had been ground out, slowly, silently, but yet, in the mask of the great overwhelming silence in the class, she might as well have roared them at the top of her lungs. What? So he could speak. He could say something, he did notice their existence. Fight me. She dared him to refuse. Her eyes gazing straight into his as she placed her hands on his table, even as she tried to control her breathing and did not so much as flinch as he gazed at her. 5 o'clock. Training ground 14. I'll be waiting. With those words, she turned around and walked back to her seat. Amidst the deeper silence, she took her place beside Shikamaru without saying a word. Breeing. All right. Settle down you brats and be qui, eet. Huh, you guys aren't noisy today. Yumi no Uruka entered the class, scratching his head at the oddity, before shrugging. Well, I guess it must be a rare day. He had no idea. Uchiha Sasuke knew the meaning of hatred. He knew what it felt like for every atom in his being and for every firing muscle in every thought, to be consumed with white-hot flames, pulsing and screeching to be released and to completely engulf the target of his rage. He understood well the process that was involved in projecting that rage onto your target, to have it channel within you, to sing within your eardrums and push you to a point that not broke past all limitations. He knew hatred. He lived in it. He bathed in it. Every day he woke up and was greeted with silence, he was reminded of it. Every morning he walked into a living room that still stank of dried blood and screams, he was lavished with it. Hence, hatred was one of the few things he could sense. Detect. He had grown so accustomed to it, that he merely knew, when hatred was emitted in his general direction. In his usual manner, disregarding of those playing at shinobi without a goal, he walked out of the classroom upon the lunch bell ringing. Within seconds, the news of the confrontation was already on the lips of a third of the academy, and people pointed at him, with poorly shushed whispers and curious, uncertain gazes. Ignoring them proved to be more difficult than normal today, and his teeth clenched behind his lips, as he decided he was not going to be dealing with their pitiful brand of gossip whilst trying to get a meal. He strode away from the academy, moving onto the roads of Konoha as he decided to get his lunch elsewhere, his mind still focused slightly on the events of the morning. The girl, what was her name again? He furrowed his eyebrows slightly. He could not recall the name of the blonde-haired girl, as previously, she had merely been another face amongst the crowd of females who wished for his attention in one way or another. Yet, she was different. There was no denying those eyes, those orbs of hers which had stared him down unflinchingly, there had been true, pure hatred within them. Hatred, anger, and loathing, these were things that Sasuke believed himself intimately familiar with, however, he could not understand why her eyes possessed that much hatred for him. He set his gaze on a small food stand not far away, his mind still deep in some form of thought. He could not recall or think of anything he had done that would cause someone to look at him with such heavy eyes filled with hatred, to the point in which the person went as far to challenge him to a fight. Truly, the girl was not worth his time. The hate in her eyes was good, decent, enough that if she applied it with fervor to her training she would become strong, she would grow stronger at a magnificent rate. However, he did not have the time to humor her. His target was that man. His target was someone who had been Anbu captain at age 13. He could not afford to waste his time fighting people who were weaker than him, people to whom he would not grow any stronger from defeating, and people who could not even be considered as stepping stones in his path. His lips twisted into a scowl. Yet, at the same time, he couldn't refuse. He would not give those at the academy the illusion that he was somehow afraid of losing, or that he was somehow incapable of fighting against that girl. Instead, a crushing defeat would cement it in their minds once and for all that he was the best, the strongest shinobi in their entire generation, and that it would be unwise for anyone to even think otherwise. He came to a stop at the small shop. It did not necessarily matter what he ate at this point just as long as he had something in his stomach. He took a seat, ignoring the noise around him, as he met the face of the brown-haired waitress. "Hello, what can I get you?" He blinked. He had momentarily been lost in thought. He had not even checked the sign outside to confirm what food this place sold. "I want some Yoayame Nichan. I'm back. Can I get the Naruto special, and make it double? I've got some hard training too." There was a momentary silence, as dull black eyes turned to face brilliant blue. "You." Sasuke grit his teeth. It was like the universe had decided that his day would be ruined by blondes. No, he was not going to deal with this right now. He stood up from his seat and turned around, only to let out a gurk, as he felt someone drag the back of his shirt, forcing the front end to tighten at his neck. "Let go of me, Dobi." "No way. Iyame-ne would kill me if I chased away a customer, even if it's Utem." "That's none of my business, now let go of me." "Not until you've bought a bowl of ramen ttibeo." What the hell was up with the idiot's grip? And why the heck was this idiot biting the hilt of a katana? Sasuke knew there was no way he should have had that much power to actually hold on to the back of his shirt with such force, making it impossible for him to leave. "I said, let go." A heavy echo of ripping cloth resounded throughout the small shop. He stumbled forward, free at last, only to turn around and spot the familiar blond boy holding onto a large part of his black shirt, the part which had the brilliant white and red fan of the Uchiha clan on it. His back was now fully exposed, as his shirt was now more or less a tattered rag than any measure of cloth. Oops, Naruto said as he removed the katana from his mouth. It was official. Uchiha Sasuke hated blondes. Dobi, what in the world were you thinking? Ino cringed, the same question running through her mind at the moment. It was currently lunch period, and she had taken up her place beneath a tree, only to immediately find herself under the scrutiny of the one person in the class that many would have least expected. Choji. Yes, not Shikamaru, who sat across from her, his eyes still in their usual lazy demeanor, the person who was actually scrutinizing her decisions, asking her the hard-hitting questions and making her realize the error of her ways, was Choji. Well, I wasn't really thinking, she said meekly, which was somewhat understandable as Choji sat beside her, his normally round and cheerful face twisted into a narrow-eyed scowl. His bag of chips lay in his hands, but they were unopened. Really, Choji was a darling, but no one really understood how terrifying the boy could be when he was taking something seriously. Yes, Ino, you weren't thinking, he said, shaking his head and making her shrink further as she turned to Shikamaru and sent him her best, help me, look. The pineapple-haired Nara turned his gaze away, pretending as though he had not seen her at all. Traitor, she mouthed. He looked as though he was going to mouth something back, before shaking his head as though he realized it would consume far more energy than he was willing to give, and instead, he resorted to another lazy shrug. To her side, Choji sighed, his face looking far less intimidating as he began rubbing his cheek. Ino, you know you can't beat Sasuke in a spar, right? She was the type of person who usually did not like being told whether or not they could or couldn't do things. Come on, I have a chance. No, Shikamaru said, placing his input for the first time in the conversation, and turning both of their attentions towards him. Sasuke might be the most arrogant person in the entire class, but most of it is well-deserved. He just might be the strongest academy student in Konoha, whereas, you occasionally struggle to defeat. Sakura. Hey, don't use Sakura as a measuring stick, you make it sound like she's. Choji's gaze looked over to her. Ino, I don't like admitting it either, but Sakura really does have the lowest taijutsu and shuriken jutsu performance in our grade, and you, well. He sighed. You struggle to beat her. I don't see how you can go up against Sasuke and win. Ino found herself biting her lower lip. Maybe he won't show up. Shikamaru shook his head. His pride won't allow it. Failing to show up could send the wrong message that he was too scared of you to fight you rather than you not being worth his time, and he'd never allow it. She frowned. Then, what if I don't show up? Shikamaru and Choji glanced at her, and then glanced back at each other, silence resonating between the two boys before they turned back to her. It was at that moment that Ino realized the weird strength of the dynamic that was possessed by the two boys, in which they seemed to understand each other without so much as saying a single word. She was close to them, yes, that much was true, but a small part of her could not help but wish to have that same level of camaraderie that they had. To have that same level of companionship with someone. Choji was the one to begin. Ino, no one will easily forget the day you challenged Uchiha Sasuke to a spar and then chickened out. That much was true. She would not be able to hold her head high ever again without being reminded of the moment she had marched up to Uchiha Sasuke's seat, frightening Inuzuka Kiba with a glare as her own gaze met that of the Uchiha, and so brazenly challenged him. Warmth rapidly seeped into her face and cheeks as she recalled the entire scene. God, what in the world had I been thinking? Why did you listen to Takai of all people? You don't even know who he is. Choji's question echoed her own thoughts. She bit her lip. I was just angry. And annoyed. And maybe the lack of sleep played a part, but. She groaned as she ran her hands through her hair. I just wanted Sasuke to look at them, at us, at any of us. To pay the girls who fawn over him at least some attention. Shikamaru and Choji remained silent. I mean, we can be annoying sometimes, and pushy, and thoughtless, but we do care about him. Sakura cares about him. Yet, I wonder if he even knows her name. Silence wafted amongst the three friends, the only audible sound being Choji's rummaging of a bag and the crunching of chips, as their small group could still hear the buzzing and chatter amongst the students, reflecting the mixed feelings about her challenge to Sasuke. Troublesome. Again, Shikamaru managed to convey her thoughts exactly in one word. Still, she looked over to the boy and realized that he was more invested in her life than usual. He was alert, listening, watching, his eyes weren't half-lidded, and his posture wasn't slouched and lazy. This was the most I had ever seen Shikamaru interested or focused on something. He caught her gaze, and his eyebrow rose. What? Nothing, I'm just surprised. Glad I guess, I mean you rarely ever pay attention to anything, so. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. If you get beat up by Sasuke, your dad would find out and he won't be happy. He'd complain about it to my dad, and my dad would mention it to my mom, and I'd be the one chewed out for standing by and letting it happen. Her left eye twitched. Of course, once a lazy bum, always a lazy bum. Just when I thought you cared. I do care. I don't want you to get beat up. She tilted her head. Really? If you get beat up, you'd be sore and grumpy, and considering I'm the one who sits next to you in class, that would be really troublesome. More irritation flowed through her as her eye continued twitching, a tick mark appearing on her forehead. Shikamaru doesn't mean it, Ino. He really just doesn't want you to get hurt, Choji interjected. Ino sighed. Leave it to Choji to abate my anger with a few choice words. Thanks, guys, but you make it sound like I don't stand a chance against him, but I'm a lot better than I look. I have a plan. No, they both said at the exact same time, causing her to flinch back in surprise. Why you didn't even listen to what it was? Ino, the last time you had a plan, it ended with you looking for Naruto all over Konoha, and getting angry that you couldn't find him, Choji reminded her. Her mouth opened, then it closed with a dry clack. Trust me, this is totally different. It'll be different this time. For whatever reason, the two of them gave her looks that showed clear disbelief, and a little bit of apprehension. Still, Yamanaka Ino was certain that her plan would work. What was the worst thing that could? She stopped that train of thought immediately. There was no way I was going to jinx it. Nah, not a chance. I already had terrible odds enough, no need to stack fate on top of that. Training Ground 5. Hinata, lost in her daydreams beside the pond, couldn't help but blush and giggle at the thought of Naruto in his underwear. Her private amusement was abruptly interrupted by a familiar voice. Hello there, Hinata, Tenten announced, suddenly appearing behind her with a knowing grin. Hello, Hinata managed, her embarrassment evident. She wished the ground would swallow her up, especially upon seeing Tenten's amused expression. How long had she been standing there? So, where is Naruto with his orange undies? Tenten teased, leaning in with a playful nudge. Hinata's blush deepened, a clear giveaway that Tenten had overheard her mumbles for the past hour. I don't know, she stammered, wishing she could disappear. Well, today he is going to learn water walking. You know it, right? Tenten continued, undeterred by Hinata's discomfort. Yeah, Hinata whispered, her voice barely audible. So, what did you bring to show off to Naruto? Tenten jibed, wiggling her eyebrows suggestively. What? Sighing, Tenten shook her head. I thought with the water training, you might want to wear a swimsuit to catch Naruto-kun's attention. The mere suggestion had Hinata looking like she might faint on the spot. Don't worry, I'm kidding, Tenten reassured her, though the damage was already done. After a few seconds of awkward silence, Tenten changed the subject. Hey, I'm curious, does the Hyuga clan use weapons? Shurikens and. Hinata began tentatively. No, I meant like specific weapons, like the Uchiha used to use the gunbai. What about the Hyuga? The Hyuga clan mostly relies on our taijutsu, Hinata explained, her voice steadier now. Seems like a waste. I'm sure the gentle fist would go great with a weapon like Nekote, Tenten mused aloud. Do you think so? Of course, think about it. Gentle fist but the fingers have metal claws that can channel chakra. Seems dangerous to me, Tenten suggested, her imagination clearly running wild. Hinata gulped, curiosity piqued. See, can we try it? Tenten's grin widened as she unfurled her scroll. Choose whatever color you want. Oi, people are staring at you, Naruto said, trailing behind Sasuke with his hands resting on the back of his head. That's what happens when Adobe rips off a portion of your shirt and you have to walk back to your home shirtless. Hey, I did offer you my jacket TTEBAO. Sasuke's eyes flickered to the orange monstrosity. No. Tsukiji offered you one of his oversized shirts. No. And Ayame offered you an apron too. No. Honestly, all of those options were far worse than walking the way he was right now. He knew that lunchtime was almost over, and the journey back home would take a while, but it was worth it rather than going back to the academy the way he was. Gah, your clan compound is way too far. It's almost like no one wanted you teams close to the village or something. Sasuke gritted his teeth. Why are you even following me? 'Cause I feel kind of bad about ripping your shirt and stuff. He grunted. I don't need your apology. Just leave me alone. Oh come on, Tem. I'm just trying to help you out. Sasuke rounded on him. I don't need any help. Especially not help from you. The Dobi was absolutely infuriating. Sasuke stared at him, with those wide-eyed blue eyes, those eyes that looked upon the world as though it was made of butterflies and roses, as though rainbows were rivers and it rained happiness and goodness. The Dobi's eyes were as bright and as clear as the sky, always looking free, limitless, open. Sasuke hated those eyes. It was one of the reasons he avoided the boy, avoided the Dobi. His was a disease, an infection of obfuscating stupidity and gullibility. A naive, open-hearted moron who would ultimately end up dying within his first 5 minutes of being a shinobi, even if he was stronger than the rest of the trash of his generation. Yet, Sasuke was sure that even if the Dobi were to be cut down by an enemy shinobi, he would be smiling in his final moments, as though he was happy, as though he was peaceful, as though he was satisfied. Oi, Tem, you're shaking, are you okay? It's not that cold. The Dobi had moved his hands towards him, to touch him, and Sasuke smacked it down with vehemence, the clap echoing loudly and drawing the attention of everyone on the street to them both. Don't touch me. Hefty silence resonated. What the hell, Tem? Sasuke did not care for the attention, and he found himself gritting his teeth as he angrily stalked down the abandoned route to his clan compound. He paid no heed to the sun striking against his exposed back due to the tear. He paid no heed to the stares and hushed whispers, as he instead made his way back to his house, back to the reminder. The reminder. That was all it was to him. A reminder. His very home was a reaffirmation of the fact that the Dobi was a fool. A very reassertion as to the fact that you couldn't trust anyone, trust anything, that the world was a place of comedic sick cruelty and unjustly hilarious jokes. Oi Tem, wait up. Sasuke clenched his teeth as hard as he could. The Dobi was still following him. Leave me the fuck alone, Dobi. He broke into a fast-paced dash, his top speed, becoming a bit of a blur to anyone not at least mid-genin level. His torn shirt made wild, air-slapping ripples against the wind. His feet left the ground in a succession so rapid, it was as though they were levitating. There, he thought. There was no way the Dobi will catch up to me now. Tem. He was blindsided, a blur so rapid and fast that Sasuke barely even had time to register the fact that it was coming in his direction. The next thing he knew, he was tackled. Instinct worked immediately, as he thrust his feet out in an offensive-defensive maneuver, kicking away his attacker and gaining some distance from him. Ultimately, both boys stood across from each other, and Sasuke grit his teeth as he found himself slightly panting, yet, across from him, the Dobi barely even looked winded. Oi Tem, what the hell is up with you? Sasuke stared at him, stared at his eyes, those same eyes, showing him compassion, showing him care. Earlier, when he had not known the boy as well, Sasuke had assumed that it was all faked. He had assumed that the laughs were a facade, that the smiles were forced, that the happiness and cheer was all an act. Why? Except it wasn't. Why? It wasn't. Those eyes, those sentiments, all of it, all of it. Why are you so happy? The declaration had sprung forth in a manner that made his own voice unrecognizable to his own ears. Naruto had also flinched back, clearly not expecting, not anticipating, the wild question. Sasuke found himself in the same shoes. He didn't understand it, didn't understand what had spurred forth that basic inner rage and anger inside him, didn't understand why it mattered. All that mattered was killing that man, nothing else mattered. Nothing else was supposed to matter. Except, they did. He had always thought of the Dobi as someone who could understand him, or someone who could at least relate with him. They both had similar, if slightly alternate circumstances. They both knew this, and though they had never mentioned it out loud, there was this understanding, this inherent conflict that had started as the very basics of their rivalry. Except, despite how much both of them truly understood the concept of loneliness, truly experienced the meaning of emptiness, Naruto smiled his way through everything. Why? Why? Because, the boy said, still smiling, still grinning, it beats the alternative. There was a relative amount of silence between the both of them. I get it, Tem. I get you, even though you try to be all cool and aloof and stuff. Not that I think you're cool or anything. I mean, you're still a Tem. Though you can be cool sometimes, I guess, Naruto ranted, leaving Sasuke just staring at him. Forget it. The last Uchiha put his hands into his pockets, as he moved to turn around. Not having family sucks, you know. System alert. The player's words have resonated significantly with Sasuke Uchiha. Closing square bracket. The 6 words had made him freeze. When you get something right, you don't have anyone to celebrate with you. When you fail at something or fall, there's no one there to tell you that you'll get it next time or help you up. When you fall sick, you have to stagger your way out of bed and treat yourself cause there's no one there to nurse you. When you feel hungry, no one will help feed you. And when you have dreams, there's no one there to give you the confidence that you can achieve it. Sasuke's breath hitched slightly in his throat. He turned around, his eyes landing on the boy, as he noted, now, with a difference, those bright blue eyes had morphed, transformed even, to a shade a tad darker, a shade with far much more depth, a shade that seemed to analyze everything and anything, a shade that seemed to withhold no secrets, to disregard privacy, and to break down walls in the name of sentiment. These eyes, they were so happy, so happy. It beats the alternative. And all at once, they weren't. Yeah, Sasuke said, his voice a bitter whisper. It sucks. There was a rush of movement, and then, Sasuke blinked, as in a blur, the dobi was in front of him, hand out, and a big, large smile. So Tem, Naruto said, grinning, let's be family. Path quest alert, Brotherhood Alliance. Description. The player has offered a Brotherhood Alliance to the elusive Sasuke Uchiha. The completion of this quest hinges on Sasuke Uchiha's decision. Closing square bracket. Objectives. Await Sasuke Uchiha's response to the Brotherhood Alliance offer. Potential rewards upon completion. Plus 500 reputation points with the Uchiha clan. Access to Sasuke Uchiha's skills. Opportunities for future collaborations with the Uchiha clan. Potential consequences of failure. Minus 200 reputation points with the Uchiha clan. Loss of potential benefits and collaborations with the Uchiha clan. Risk of rivalries or enmity with Sasuke and his allies. Player action required. Patiently wait for Sasuke Uchiha's decision and be prepared for any outcome. Closing square bracket. Silence. No. Quest update. Brotherhood Alliance. Status. Failed. Unfortunately, Sasuke Uchiha has declined the gamer's offer of a Brotherhood Alliance. Despite the gamer's best efforts to persuade him, Sasuke remains steadfast in his decision not to join forces. Closing square bracket. Consequences of failure. Minus 200 reputation points with the Uchiha clan. Loss of potential benefits and collaborations with the Uchiha clan. Risk of rivalries or enmity with Sasuke Uchiha and his allies. Ah, come on Tem. We were having a moment here. Moment's over. Let's be family. Not a chance in hell. We could be brothers. I'd rather die. As the conversation trailed off into absurdity, Sasuke turned to leave, finding himself unexpectedly at the entrance of the Uchiha clan compound. The memories of that day were as clear in his mind as if they had happened just moments ago. It seems like no matter how far I go, the past always catches up, he thought, but a sudden voice halted his departure. Let's fight and I'll beat my love into you, Tem. Alert. World Quest. Quest title. Round 2, bitch. Description. Engage in a rematch with Sasuke Uchiha. Prove your skills and resolve in this intense one-on-one battle. Closing square bracket. Objective. Defeat Sasuke Uchiha in combat. Closing square bracket. Rewards. Fire Style. Fireball Jutsu, plus 200 reputation with Sasuke Uchiha, 1000 experience points. Closing square bracket. Failure. None. Closing square bracket. Naruto's eyes gleamed with excitement as he eyed the reward, a fireball jutsu. This is gonna be awesome. A grin spread across his face as he imagined the possibilities. Just for beating this tem, I'll get to throw fireballs at everything. Fireballs at the trash to take it out, fireballs at my landlord when rent's due, and even fireballs at my taxes. Looks like I've found the solution to all my problems, fireball. Why does every blonde I meet today want to fight? Sasuke muttered, more to himself than to Naruto, who simply shrugged, clueless about what the emo was referring to. But unlike that girl, you might actually give me a challenge, Sasuke added, a hint of respect tinting his voice as his eyes shifted from black to the vivid crimson of his Sharingan. Don't regret this, Dobi, he warned, his tone serious. In an instant, Sasuke's arm flicked forward, releasing a dozen shurikens that spun viciously through the air towards Naruto. Unfazed, Naruto reached into his pouch and drew a single shuriken. With a precise, fluid motion, he threw it with a practiced flick of his wrist. The shuriken spun rapidly, its path meticulously calculated. As it flew, it clipped each of Sasuke's shurikens in turn. The impact altered their trajectories just enough, causing them to veer off course. Each shuriken from Sasuke's barrage missed Naruto by margins that seemed calculated down to the millimeter. That shuriken bukijutsu, Sasuke growled, his frustration evident. The ease and effortlessness with which Naruto had deflected his attack reminded him of Itachi's own prowess with shurikens. Sasuke's eyes ignited with the crimson glow of the Sharingan as he surged forward, his movements a blur that would leave even a seasoned Chunin envious. Yet Naruto's gaze remained sharp, his eyes tracking every swift motion with ease. As Sasuke closed in, Naruto took a calculated jab at him. Just inches from impact, Sasuke executed a swirling kata, spinning clockwise with a fluid, spiraling movement that was both defensive and gracefully offensive. As he completed his spin, he aimed a precise kick at Naruto's liver, his body coiled tight like a spring. But Naruto was quicker. His hand snapped down, blocking Sasuke's kick with an effortless parry. You did it wrong, dumbass, Naruto chided, a smirk playing on his lips as he expelled a burst of chakra from his palm. The force of the chakra was like a cannon blast, hitting Sasuke squarely and sending him hurtling backward. Sasuke's body flew through the air, his limbs flailing helplessly as he crashed into the walls of the Uchiha compound. The impact echoed through the courtyard, dust billowing around his crumpled form like a cloud. As the dust settled, Sasuke lay among the debris, momentarily stunned by the powerful blow, his once poised and lethal form now limp and disheveled like a discarded rag doll. Sasuke leapt to his feet, swiftly forming a series of hand signs as he drew a deep breath. He filled his lungs with air and concentrated his chakra, mixing it with the breath he held. Focusing fire chakra between his pointer finger and thumb, he formed a small circle in front of his mouth. As he expelled the chakra-laden air through the circle, like blowing a bubble, it transformed into a blazing fireball that shot towards Naruto at high speed. The fireball hit with a resounding boom, erupting upon impact where Naruto had just been standing. Flames engulfed the area, charring the grass and scorching the earth, leaving a blackened circle in the aftermath of the explosion. From a safe distance to the right, Naruto's voice rang out, I don't think I can use this fireball on my taxes. He watched the smoldering ground where the fireball had struck, a wry smile on his face. Substitution jutsu, Sasuke muttered under his breath, clicking his tongue in annoyance. I really want to try that next, so I'm going to have to finish this fight, Naruto declared, clapping his fist into his palm. You think you're faster than my eyes? Sasuke retorted skeptically. The Senju Taijutsu was designed to beat the Uchiha because of its speed. A wave of confusion swept over Sasuke as he noticed Naruto's ankles glow with an intense light, a sign of chakra concentration. Before he could process it further, Naruto vanished from his sight. Sasuke's eyes widened, his Sharingan spinning as he tried to track the sudden movement. In an instant, Naruto reappeared directly in front of him. Sasuke only had a moment to see Naruto's determined blue eyes before he felt an immense force strike his face. The world spun around him, and he felt a surreal disorientation as his body was propelled upward. Why is everything upside down? Sasuke wondered dimly as he twisted in midair, his body flailing helplessly. It felt like he was a toy being tossed by an unseen giant, his control over his movements completely lost. The force of Naruto's flash fist, combined with his explosive chakra control, had sent Sasuke soaring through the air like a leaf caught in a hurricane. Sasuke's mind struggled to keep up with the rapid change in his surroundings, the sky and ground swapping places in rapid succession. Quest. Round 2, bitch. Status. Successfully completed. Rewards granted. Fire style. Fireball Jutsu, plus 200 reputation with Sasuke Uchiha, 1000 experience points. Closing square bracket. Yata. Naruto cheered as he looked at the system window, clicking on the reward. System notification. Skill unlock error. Issue. Fire style. Fireball Jutsu cannot be unlocked in the Uzumaki clan skill table. Closing square bracket. Reason. Fireball Jutsu is not a technique of the Uzumaki clan. Closing square bracket. System quest alert. Quest. Learn Fireball Jutsu. Objective. Unlock Fire Chakra Affinity. Practice the basic hand signs of the Fireball Jutsu times 10. Attempt to perform the Fireball Jutsu times 1. Closing square bracket. Reward. Skill, Fireball Jutsu. Closing square bracket. Opening square bracket. Failure. None. Closing square bracket. Action required. Confirm acceptance or declination of quest. Closing square bracket. Naruto groaned in frustration. Of course, what did I expect? He muttered to himself as his eyes scanned the objectives. Yo, Tem, how do you unlock the fire? His voice trailed off when he noticed Sasuke knocked out, face first on the asphalt, his limbs awkwardly bent beneath him. That's gotta hurt, Naruto thought, grimacing slightly. With a cautious motion, Naruto nudged Sasuke with his foot. You alive, Tem? He asked. Hearing a faint breath, Naruto sighed in relief. Good, I'm just gonna place this here, he said, setting a cup of ramen beside Sasuke's unconscious form before darting away from the Uchiha compound. Meanwhile, Ino, the sun's been down for a while now. I don't think Sasuke is going to show. Any minute now, Choji, any minute now. An hour later. Tenten, do you know how to unlock fire affinity? Naruto asked as he wandered into the training ground. I don't think you can unlock fire affinity, it's something you were born with, Tenten replied. Naruto didn't argue back as he looked at the objectives. Since it said to unlock fire affinity, there must be a way. Whatever, Naruto thought as he finally noticed the chaos of the training ground. Tenten was panting as if she had just finished running a marathon, clutching a shield riddled with holes. Nearby, Hinata lay sprawled on the ground, unconscious, with a pair of orange Nakote still fitted on her hands. The sight was so bizarre, Naruto couldn't help but blurt out, "What happened?" "It's a girl's thing," Tenten replied, her breath still coming in heavy pants. Without missing a beat, Naruto transformed into a female version of himself, hoping to bypass the girl's thing barrier. Tenten gave him a look that was half amusement, half exasperation. It's a friend thing, she corrected herself, seeing through Naruto's ruse. Hey, I am your friend, Naruto protested in a mock-offended tone, still in his transformed state. Shut up and let's get going to the water walking exercise, Tenten dismissed him, her focus shifting to the task at hand. She led the way to the pond where she first mastered the skill, with Naruto trotting behind her. Tenten began explaining the nuances of the water walking exercise with the patience of a teacher outlining the fundamentals to a novice student. It's called the water walking exercise. It works under similar properties as surface walking, except instead of trying to stick to a surface, you're trying to repel away very slightly. This next control exercise took me a few days to truly get it, so I expect this to take up most of the next few weeks for you. Now, her explanation was interrupted by the impatient Naruto. Why do you expect it to take so long for me? You shouldn't interrupt someone like that, Naruto. You should wait for a break in speech before asking a question, Tenten admonished lightly. As for why I expect it to take you much longer, I have two reasons, both equally as important. To start with, I have been walking up walls since I first learned to walk, so I had much more experience than you will have when you start. Practice makes perfect and you won't get better at something if you don't practice. Naruto nodded in understanding. The other reason is that I have much smaller chakra reserves than you. It's easier to control a small amount of something than it is to control a larger amount. Your reserves are, to put it bluntly, massive. Naruto nodded, absorbing the information before cheekily adding, I know it's over 9,000. What? Tenten's confusion was palpable. The idea of quantifying chakra in such terms was foreign to her. It's a boy's thing, Naruto quipped, a smirk playing on his lips. Tenten, momentarily caught off guard, almost instinctively started to perform the transformation jutsu on herself before halting. What am I doing? She questioned herself, staring at Naruto's proud, yet undeniably silly, expression. Your stupidity is contagious, she declared, though the corners of her mouth betrayed her with a reluctant smile. Hey! Yumi no Uruka knew that what he was doing was wrong. There was a major risk to it, considering he was not an eccentric higher-tier jonin like Hitaki Kakashi, who could simply smile off his transgressions through a masked facade and a lazy, asinine excuse. He knew it in his heart that it was wrong, doubly so given his post as a teacher of young, corruptible minds. He knew that his reputation could take a severe nosedive like a rare earth country eagle swooping down and snatching an unsuspecting lamb suckling at its mother's breast. There was a very real risk involved, which included some of the rather more prudish kunoichi, who would henceforth regard him like a maggot that had emerged from the excreta of a worm upon discovering the nature of the act. His place in society would be condemned forever, and he would be unable to do as much as stare into the eyes of clerks when he bought his groceries without hearing hushed whispers and condemning judging looks. Regardless of all this, he sat on the stall of the Konoha Academy's male staff bathroom, giggling away as his fingers gently turned another page, enjoying the feel of the paper, and ignoring the dribble of blood that emerged from his left nostril. It was a new Ika novel, and he'd be damned if he didn't read it. Kazama-san, you sly dog, grabbing Rashina-chan and Nikoto-chan. It was a guilty pleasure stretching slowly into the realms of a bubbling obsession with the book. He had begun reading the previous night, promising himself to only go about 30 pages before stopping and then getting some sleep so he could wake up bright and early and have more energy to shout at his usual brand of annoying brats. Of course, 30 minutes later and there was the sound of a rooster crowing as beads of sunlight burst through his window, only drawing his attention because of the manner in which they had landed on a particular, feisty paragraph in the book, making the Chunin instructor realize his folly. He had been expecting it to be a horrible start to a day, but imagine his surprise on getting to class and meeting it quiet, completely removing the need for him to actually exert more energy shouting at the top of his voice in order to get the normally rambunctious brats listening to him. Not to mention the fact that they all seemed eager to learn. For once, all the students in the class were on the edge of their seats, furiously scribbling and answering his questions with the accuracy and speed of a master archer who had been blessed with an arrow creation Kekai Genkei. Everyone seemed eager and even impatient. As though they finally realized that they were not learning as much as they normally could be and wanted to absorb as much as possible in one day. Hell, even Sasuke answered questions in class. And Kiba was quiet all through. Uruka could only attribute this legendary stroke of fortune on his end to the gods of erotica finally granting him blessings for being a loyal and devout follower. Hence, he had decided to repay them by continuing to read their holy scriptures, which was of course delivered by their anointed one, the Toad Sanin of Konoha. It was lunch break for now, however, and he knew he only had a few minutes of reading. As long as he was able to allow his fingers to rub the sharp-edged pages and the hardback spine, allow his nose to take in a further decent whiff of the crispy smell of newly made paper, and allow his eyes to roam over the artistic masterpiece written in words, then he was suitably satisfied. The day seemed to be getting better by the second, and so far, nothing could ruin it. The day seemed to be getting better by the second, and so far, nothing could ruin it. He froze, a shudder running down his spine as he stood up from the seat and closed the book. He peered out of the stall toward the windows and paid close attention to any sound he could hear. Okay, that was close. For a second, he believed he might have tempted fate and just invited some sort of great catastrophe upon himself by uttering those dreaded, often ironic words. Calm down, Uruka. You've just been reading too many novels lately. I mean, what are the odds that saying, "Nothing can ruin this day," would actually cause something ironic to happen and prove my words wrong? This is real life. Still, he put the book in his pocket and opened the staff door, peeking to ensure that there were no hordes of angry kunoichi about to lynch him for reading erotica in the academy while he was on duty. Sighing, he closed it and turned around. Chunin Yumi no Uruka. Yumi no Uruka saw death. Yumi no Uruka saw death in the form of purple hair and an unmistakable cat Anbu mask. He did not respond. Instead, He made a large, tiring sigh, before he slowly closed the book with a thick snap, and then he pocketed it. Calmly, he got to his knees, and then bent his head low. My only request is that you make it quick and painless. He kneeled in that notion for several seconds, waiting constantly for the blade that would cleave his neck for his actions, only to blink in surprise when, after numerous seconds, it did not come. He flicked his head upwards back at the woman, the Anbu operative that was codenamed Nako, and yet, despite not being able to see her face, he could tell that she was clearly amused by the entire display. Are you finished? He blinked, once, twice. Then, realization that the woman was not about to execute him for reading Ika Ika in the privacy of the male bathroom dawned upon him, and he leapt to his feet, coughing awkwardly. Ah, of course, Anbu-san, I was just practicing for a recital, a play, or musical, about the honorable death of a samurai, ha. Maybe she really should kill him, if only for how pathetic that excuse had sounded. What you do in your free time is of little to no interest to me, Yumino-san, she said crisply. And you are clearly too timid to attempt corrupting a student, so I have no need for concern. Haruka winced at the timid. He honestly didn't know if he should feel relieved, flattered, or greatly insulted. I am here on the orders of Hokage-sama. Yamanaka Inoichi believes that someone could have been tampering with the students' records, scores, and exams. Most particularly in the case of bias against the student, Uzumaki Naruto. All at once, Haruka's form straightened, and he was instantly all business. Well, I know that some teachers may not particularly get along with him, but I don't think anyone would go as far as to. Unfortunately, what you think does not matter. What matters is that I have been given a task to accomplish, and you will aid me in accomplishing it. Haruka took a step back uncertainly. He knew that the Anbu weren't exactly the most friendly of individuals, considering the lives they lived, which included witnessing and committing gruesome acts of murder, assassinations, and sometimes, even genocides. Still, he felt that the woman was just a tad bit rude. Hokage-sama requested that I meet you, and stressed the importance of discretion in this task. You are to gather every test script, every record, every paper or document. In relation to Uzumaki Naruto and his classmates, and you are to hand it over to me without drawing attention to yourself, she said in one quick, brisk, and formal breath. Are you up to the task? Haruka's nose rumpled up. All at once, the reason as to why the woman had decided to ambush him in the male bathroom made much more sense. Still, he found himself confused, wondering why there was need for all the secrecy. It was just a couple of assignments and exam scripts, not documents detailing all the concubinatus possessed by the daimyo's wife. I don't get it, why all the mystery? Because this mission is technically classified. Haruka scowled. Classified, she repeated again, though with a noticeable strain in her voice. This is why I do not quite get along with shinobi in administrative positions. Years spent in an unchanging environment ultimately dulls your skills. Excuse me, what would happen if an Anbu operative were to walk into the academy and ask for a compiled scripts of students on orders from the Hokage? Amongst whom, are 7 clan heirs to the most notable clans in Konoha, the Yamanaka, Nara, Akamichi, Inazuka, Hyuga, Aburame, and the last Uchiha. Haruka blinked. A reason for this would be demanded, and if the reason is given as an investigation, the question will be asked as to what is the purpose of the investigation, which will bring into the light the matter of a suspected bias of a teacher against a student, and therefore suggest the possibility of foul play in the administration of the Konoha Shinobi Academy. Haruka stared. What would you say if you were accused of elevating the clan heirs and giving them special attention over the rest of your students, allowing them to have better grades and scores? He immediately flared. That's preposterous. I would never do anything like that. I am aware of that, she stated. However, the civilian populace is not. In their perspective, if one teacher is capable of letting his own personal bias influence him enough to sabotage a student, who is to say, all of them aren't? He swallowed dryly. I hadn't thought about it. The Anbu shook her head. Of course you had not. It is not your job to consider the details and delicacies of the Konohan socio-political system. You're just a chunin. Never in his entire life, in all his years, had Haruka ever felt his rank feel so inadequate. Now, I ask you again, are you up to the task? He did not trust himself to be able to speak, and instead, he merely tilted his head up and down. Good. After the classes are done for the day, I expect the files to be compiled and ready for collection. She had vanished in a swirl of leaves that left Iruka standing, in a daze, as he brought up his left hand, and he ran it through his hair. Just a chunin. The 3 words pierced at him with a form of raging heat, and indescribable cold, as though someone had run him through an iceberg that was tipped with magma. Idly, his gaze flicked over to the Ika book on the ground, and then, he stared into his hand. The loud echo of the bell broke through the entire academy, and slowly, mechanically, like a machine unhinged, a wound-up toy unleashed, Yumino Iruka turned around and walked out of the bathroom. A brand new, crisp clean, hardcover novel lay abandoned on the pristine white floor. Naruto, disguised as Tenten, found himself in the peculiar position of walking a tiny Japanese chin dog through the park. "Come on, you little bastard, or I'll punt you." The dog decided that moment was perfect for a bathroom break, right on Naruto's pants. Naruto's eyes widened in disbelief, and for a split second, he contemplated sending the tiny canine into orbit using his. Failed. He stopped. I need a new name for this. Failed chakra control technique. Sounds lame, let's go with chakra explosion technique. Nah, chakra propulsion. No. Naruto's thoughts on naming his unique application of chakra control were cut short by the sound of the system notification. Alert. World quest generated. Due to the close reputation between Yumino Iruka and player Naruto, a new quest has arisen from Iruka's current existential crisis. Closing square bracket. Alert. World quest. Quest title. Iruka's Cheer Up Mission. Objective. Yumino Iruka is going through a tough time. As someone with a close bond to Iruka, your mission is to cheer him up. This can be achieved through thoughtful gestures, spending quality time, or providing meaningful assistance to lighten his burdens. Closing square bracket. Rewards. 200 reputation with Iruka. Closing square bracket. A lesson. Failure. Iruka gains the status depression. Closing square bracket. Action required. Acceptance or declination of quest. Yata. He exclaimed, startling the dog, which scampered back a few steps, its eyes wide. With a grin that stretched ear to ear, Naruto hurriedly returned the dog to its owner, barely containing his joy at having found the perfect excuse to ditch the dog. The mission was over, and Naruto couldn't have been happier to leave the little bastard behind. The sun was high, yet Konohagakure no Sato was clouded over by the remnants of morning fog. The air was cool, providing a relief to Iruka's body. The sky remained a brief dark blue, the birds seemed subdued, and the insects were silent. The training ground was desolate. A rhythm began with the sound of labored breaths, not the kind expected during the more sensitive activities of the night, but rather, the kind that one might find emanating from men fleeing for their lives, running as if chased by demons metamorphosed from cheetahs and hot on their tails. Grunts of exertion followed in the same manner. The sounds echoed dryly into the morning air, to the extent that one could be forgiven for assuming a vengeful spirit had risen, intent on haunting the location with all the subtlety of a scorned lover plotting a swift comeuppance. The man in question allowed himself a brief sigh, a quick reprieve, before he rose, stretching his arms as far back as he could. It wasn't easy, he noted. It was not as easy as Iruka had thought. That, perhaps, was the strangest paradox. He knew it was not easy, yet he had calculated that the difficulty, no matter how vast, would still be surmountable. Lifting a horse onto your shoulder and tossing it into a bath was not easy, yet he had been prepared for the difficult task of lifting, for the weight, and for the determination required to painstakingly put one foot in front of the other as he approached his destination and unleashed the equine into the water. However, he had not been prepared for the creature to resist all the way, to squirm, to fight back, and to extend its rear and deliver hooked kicks into his skull. It had only been a day, and he knew there could be no immediate results. Still, he had expected, or at least anticipated, that he would have been able to lift the horse and take his first step. Instead, he had barely been able to make the horse budge. The analogy of the horse was quite apt, he noted with a sigh, one filled with bitter merriment. The taste of acrid fruit and soured lactate stained his palate. Maybe if he utilized more analogies, his students would be more inclined to listen to him in class. Or perhaps, would that instead put them to sleep? Would they stare at him like he had grown two heads, the second of which was a cross between an aged monk and a pubescent teen? Perhaps, he thought, this was a bad idea. It was unlike him to get riled up so strongly, to grit his teeth and squeeze his fists, and then declare that he was going to become stronger. It was unlike him to find himself completely discontent with his peaceful life as a teacher, imparting knowledge to the cheerful students who wished to become legends in their own rights. The world needed teachers, it was a necessity. Teachers built up foundations, continued traditions, passed down legacies, and ensured that their students would survive and, most importantly, thrive. He had always wanted to be a teacher, and he had achieved that goal. Then came the next question: now, what? Haruka had never felt the need to ask himself that question before. He was perfectly content, perfectly fine with his post, his role as an instructor to young, gentle, fragile minds and hearts of young innocent children. A task he would continue to do, until perhaps one day he might open a larger academy and become a principal. Just a chunin. Then he remembered those words, and his dream fell flat. His ambition became empty, shallow. He could not hate the woman, the Anbu, for he knew the type of lives they lived. He knew that they had seen horrors and committed unspeakable acts to ensure that people like him could live comfortable lives out of general risk. The statistics did not lie. Most shinobi in administrative positions tended to live, on average, at least 3 times longer than shinobi in the active field. Some of them even got to retire. Only 4 out of 10 shinobi actually lived long enough to see retirement, and of those 4, 3 of them were likely to have been in administrative positions. The man shook his head, staring at his sweat-drenched form, resisting the urge to laugh at doing something so ridiculous. That Anbu had lit a powerful spark within him, one which was still burning. The first thing he had thought of doing was to rush out and train, and then become a jonin, just to disprove the woman out of spite. Except, he knew that he wasn't jonin material. Jonin were the cream of the crop, the best the village had to offer. Most of them either war heroes or experts in one specific art or another, and some of them had gone above and beyond to be considered S-class. In contrast, he was pitiful. Slightly above average chakra reserves, average handseal speed, average genjutsu skills, average taijutsu skills, average ninjutsu skills, average everything. He was the very definition of what a jonin was not. There was no magic he was going to use to suddenly find himself standing at the top with the likes of Hitaki Kakashi and Maeda Guy. The question, of course, was did he even want to stand amongst them? He shook his head and sighed. It was a fun thought, entertaining the idea at the time, but of course, there was no way anything close to that would ever happen. Haruka-sensei. Haruka blinked, his mind drawn from his musings as his eyes flickered over to a familiar blonde-haired form. It was a form that he had not seen for weeks, and a form that he had often queried the Hokage on, only to receive often vague confirmations about the boy's whereabouts and activities. Naruto. The boy's face scrunched up as he stared at him. You stink, Haruka-sensei. You really need a bath. Haruka's left eye could only twitch ever so lightly. He wanted to immediately raise his voice, demand questions, ask where the boy had been and what he had been doing, and chastise him for that being the first thing that had come out of his mouth after not seeing him for a long time. Instead, he sighed. Sure. The boy blinked, his eyes immediately going wide. Huh. Haruka scratched the back of his head. I'll take a bath, Naruto, heaven knows I need one, at least, before classes start for today anyway. The boy stared, before immediately going defensive. Oi, who the hell are you and what have you done with Haruka-sensei? He resisted the urge to allow his eye to twitch. Very funny, Naruto. Kai. This time, Haruka's eye did twitch when he noticed the young blonde charge with his hand placed in the familiar seal for dispelling genjutsu. A double-layered illusion. That just proves that there's no way you're Haruka. He pointed his finger at him accusingly. I'm not gonna lose to some imposter. Kai. Haruka's eye began twitching madly, as a slow tick mark was beginning to form. Huh. A triple-layered genjutsu. No way. Ka. Ouch. His famed fist of tough love was rendered upon the blonde's head, smacking him down as Haruka held the comically steaming fist up. Still think this is a genjutsu? Haruka watched as Naruto turned over from his position on the ground, a large fulfilled smile on his face. Ah, there you are, Haruka-sensei. Hey, did you know that there's a guy going around transformed as you? His eye continued twitching. Oh, yeah. Naruto sprang up to his feet in one motion. I mean, he looked like you and all, but he kinda got your face all wrong. My face, huh? Yup. The guy was all scowls and broody and kinda emo-ish, like Tem, but constipated. Uruka's tick mark returned in full measure. So I knew he couldn't be you. I mean, Uruka-sensei is the coolest, kindest, most oesamest teacher I know. Nothing ever gets him down. Uruka could not help the manner in which his annoyance deflated. Instead, he could only let out a smile and give a chuckle. Oesamest isn't a word, Naruto. Bah, what do those dictionary guys know about making up cool words? He smiled. I'm sure the lexicographers know a lot more about it than you might think. Naruto grinned, a wild, carefree grin. See, only Uruka-sensei would know about awesome words, or know that oesamest isn't a word, or know about lexicographers. Lexicographers. He corrected automatically. Naruto shook his head. See, you're cool, Uruka-sensei. Uruka could only let out a brief chuckle at his student. As flattered as I am, Naruto, I'm afraid most of what I know is general knowledge. There are jonin who know much more than I do. Naruto pouted, putting his hands lazily behind his head. I don't see any jonin spending 7 hours a day to teach us anything they know. Uruka blinked. Was it coincidence that Naruto's topic had strayed into an area that his mind had recently been contemplating? Of course, it was. What else could it be? Still, Uruka engaged in his lecture tone. They can't, Naruto. Jonin are the elite shinobi of the village, and they are needed in the field, carrying out important missions in which they risk their lives and well-being for the good of the village. I know all that, Naruto whined. It's just, you know, they're this super awesome elite ninja type that everyone wants to be. You think they could spend a day out of their free time and stuff to just branch the academy and teach us something? Teach us anything. Uruka's mouth opened, and then it closed. There are reasons why I don't think that would be possible. Naruto quirked a disbelieving eyebrow. Well, Uruka placed his hand on his chin. Once you graduate, you'll be assigned to a jonin sensei, and they will handle your training. Doesn't that mean that teaching us stuff while we're still in the academy would kinda make their jobs easier for them in the long run? I mean, we'd already know each other and have a grasp of some of the more complex stuff and all. Uruka found that to be somewhat true. Most of what they could teach you would be rather advanced for people in your age and level, Naruto. Which would be way better. Naruto yelled, his hands going up into the air. I've been reading Gigi's books, and there was some stuff in there about elemental natures, and how each person has a distinctive nature, and how it takes years to master them. Just think about how much cooler and stronger we would all be if we started learning at the academy. And what? Let impressionable young children gain access to giant fireballs, tsunamis, and hurricanes. That would have been his response, except, well, it wasn't like that wasn't supposed to be the case anyway. Kind and caring he may be, but naive he was not. Would it not be better to let them have access to these powers early? To teach them the value of responsibility more firmly? What if a child accidentally shot a fireball at another child and caused grievous harm? On one hand, both the assaulting party and the receiving party would learn a very valuable lesson about the potential danger inherent in the power and chakra they possessed, and on the other hand, once word got out to civilians, they might be wary of sending their children to a place where they could be grievously harmed or killed. Or, the children in question would be allured by the realization that there were people their age with that kind of power. All I'm saying, Uruka-sensei, Naruto began, scratching the back of his head, is that all we learn is what you guys teach us? And if you taught us, well, if you really taught us, not just boring us to death with old stuff written in books or making us memorize stuff that we'll never really need. Naruto shrugged. We'd be awesome. The gears in Uruka's brain churned, as though it had been an old rusty engine which had recently been firmly cleaned and lubricated. The Konoha Shinobi Academy teaching syllabus had not changed too much since the era of the second Hokage. The only major difference had been the restriction of the graduating age, to allay fears of any more child geniuses going berserk from the pressures of the shinobi lifestyle, but that was it. They taught the same subjects, the same routines, implemented the same drills and the same practices. This routine of teaching had grown so monotonous that most of the teachers and students alike considered them a chore. They considered the Shinobi Academy a waste of time. Uruka could feel his heart thumping heavily in his chest. He could never be a Jonin. Sure, he could manage to make his way to special Jonin class, and then what? Where would his satisfaction be attained? From going on harder, more dangerous missions. From the better paycheck. From the sense of adventure. Money was not an issue. Danger was not his calling. Adventure was not his dream. Oh no, he would never be a Jonin. Instead, he was a teacher. What if he had been looking at it the wrong way? What if, instead of wanting to become more in the sense of accomplishment, did not mean a promotion? What if it meant, he became a better teacher? To teach, to implement knowledge and understanding in tactics, to have his students possess sharp wits, sharper skills, and the sharpest of minds and blades. So sharp, that upon graduation, their Jonin instructors would gaze upon their skills, mouth agape in astonishment, as the bewildered question escaped their lips. Who the hell taught you that? Their answers. Yumi no fucking Iruka, that's who. And when the lips of Jonin sang songs of a mysterious teacher who went above and beyond with their students, and said students went on to excel above and beyond, carrying the lessons of their mentors, of their sensei. He would not even need to find the woman who had scorned him, as she stared in confusion at how a mere teacher was more respected than she. He would smile and say, "Of course you wouldn't understand. You're just an Anbu." Iruka let out an excited breath. "Thank you, Naruto." The blonde in question blinked owlishly. You're welcome. I guess, for whatever awesome cool stuff I did that you're thanking me for." He rubbed his hand through the blonde boy's hair, a deep smile on his face. "You helped me realize something. And, I think you may have helped a lot more people than you realize as well." Naruto grinned. "Helping people is fun." Iruka's smile grew wilder. "Yes it is, Naruto." The image of a classroom full of rambunctious people filled his mind, and the image of these people smiling came right after. "It really is." Quest completion. Iruka's cheer-up mission. Status. Successfully completed. Rewards granted. Plus 200 reputation with Iruka. Player Naruto's reputation status with Yumi no Iruka has evolved from friendly to honored. Closing square bracket. A lesson. The reward lesson is a benefit that player Naruto can request from Iruka, who will utilize all available resources to assist the player. Closing square bracket. Naruto smiled as he noticed Iruka, who seemed lost in thought. "Iruka-sensei, I need your help." The man immediately set aside his concerns, giving Naruto his full attention. "What do you need, Naruto?" "Sensei, how can I unlock fire affinity?" Iruka frowned, unsure how to explain. "Naruto, a chakra nature affinity can't be unlocked. Everyone is born with a unique affinity for an element," he explained, watching as Naruto's shoulders slumped and he dropped to his knees. "God damn it, I can't learn the fireball jutsu. So much for beating that Tem to get that reward. You fought Sasuke." "Yeah, I won, by the way. And he gave you the fireball jutsu," Iruka repeated, trying to understand. "Kinda," Naruto replied, his voice low. "Naruto, you can use fire jutsu without a fire affinity," Iruka stated, trying to lift his spirits. "Nah. Iruka's brow furrowed with concern. "Naruto, what do you mean, nah? Let me show you." Naruto's paw. I stood by the lake's edge, watching Iruka-sensei prepare to demonstrate something I thought was impossible for me. The evening air was cool against my skin, the surface of the lake smooth, reflecting the fading light. Iruka took a deep breath, his hands moving through seals with practiced ease. A sense of anticipation tingled through me. As he completed the final seal, he exhaled sharply. From his lips burst a brilliant orb of fire, bright against the darkening sky. It soared over the lake, a fiery sphere casting dancing reflections on the water's surface. The fireball illuminated everything around us with a warm, orange glow, and the heat from it brushed against my face, even from a distance. Mesmerized, I watched the fireball travel in an arc before it finally dissipated into sparks that fizzled out like tiny stars returning to the sky. "Awesome, I can do that." Iruka nodded. "Yes, while people with a natural fire affinity have a stronger fireball initially." "Initially? Yes, like everything, practice makes perfect. Do you know what my natural affinity is?" he inquired, his eyes twinkling. Being smart, Iruka chuckled softly. "No. Out of the 5 natural elemental affinities, fire, wind, earth, lightning, and water, my natural affinity is earth." "Because you are stubborn." Iruka just snorted in response. "Sure, Even with my earth affinity, I can do a basic fireball jutsu. Want to try? I nodded eagerly. Good, take out the jutsu scroll, he instructed. I froze. I didn't have a jutsu scroll, I just needed to complete the objectives given by the system, and voila, I'd get the skill. In a pinch, I activated spirit possession, feeling a sudden calm wash over me. Instinctively, it was like whispers in my ears told me what to say. Uruka-sensei, I was actually searching for a way to get the fire affinity before trying to practice the jutsu. Uruka nodded, understanding. So, I left the scroll at home, but since you already know the jutsu, why not just guide me? Okay, Uruka agreed, then began to explain the basic mechanisms and hand signs. Try it. I nodded, taking a deep breath to center myself. As I completed the hand signs, horse, serpent, ram, monkey, boar, horse, tiger, I focused intensely, connecting my pointer finger and thumb to form a circle. Drawing deep into my chakra reserves, I felt the energy swirl and gather, a sensation of warmth spreading from my core to my fingertips. My breath held, I exhaled slowly, envisioning a blazing inferno in my mind's eye. A surge of heat burst forth from my lips as a small fireball, the size of a tennis ball, formed and flickered before me. It was a bright, pulsating orb of orange and red flames, dancing with life. The heat was intense, almost scorching my face, yet it was exhilarating to feel such power emanating from within me. The fireball cast a warm glow on my hands, and I could feel the slight sting of heat as if I were holding a lit match too close. As the fireball hovered in the air for a moment, I marveled at its creation. It was a raw and primal force, yet under my control. The warmth radiated into the cool air of the evening, mixing with the lake's chill in a whirl of steam. I was creating fire, manipulating the elements with my own chakra, something I had only dreamed of doing. Quest: Learned Fireball Jutsu. Status: Successfully completed. Congratulations, player Naruto has completed the quest without following the objectives. Closing square bracket. Achievement unlocked, Unpredictability. Rewards granted, 5,000 experience points. Skill: Fire Style, Fireball Jutsu. Level: 1 Active. CP: 100 CP per 100 units of diameter. Description: AC ranked jutsu that involves mixing air in your lungs with chakra, then igniting it to form a ball of flames projected towards a target. Closing square bracket. Passive enhancements. Fire nature affinity, gives the user's natural affinity to fire, improving control and potency of fire-based jutsu. Closing square bracket. Active effects. Air capacity, increases the capacity of the lungs to hold air by 25%, allowing for larger and more powerful fireballs. Closing square bracket. As soon as I saw the fire affinity on the notification screen, I felt a sudden surge within me, warmth spreading from the core of my being. It was like a dormant volcano had awakened inside me, sending ripples of fiery energy coursing through my veins. I could almost hear the crackle and hiss of flames, the sensation so real and vivid. Now I want to see what a natural fireball looks like. Uruka couldn't hide his pride as Naruto managed to produce a fireball on his first try, and it was impressively sized too. As he watched Naruto gear up for another attempt, he nodded in approval. Good, practice makes perfect, he thought, smiling. But his smile vanished as the next fireball erupted from Naruto's hands, growing to the size of a house. Uruka could feel the intense heat washing over him, making him step back instinctively. As the giant fireball hit the lake, it produced a massive cloud of steam, the hot vapor mixing with the cool air and enveloping him. A single thought crossed Uruka's mind as he felt the warm steam from the lake hit his face. The third Hokage was taught by the first and the second. The fourth Hokage was taught by Lord Jiraiya. His eyes then turned to Naruto, who was grinning broadly. And the fifth Hokage, Naruto Uzumaki, taught by Yumino Uruka. The thought made him chuckle, swelling his heart with pride as he placed his hand on Naruto's head. Let's go get some ramen, he suggested. Yata. Naruto cheered, darting off ahead, while Uruka's gaze lingered on his back. He remembered the ANBU's orders, an investigation into a suspected bias of a teacher against a student, the hampering of Naruto's talent by those supposed to nurture it. Uruka couldn't excuse himself from that list. If I had just been better, Naruto would have had the means to have his talents bloom, he thought regretfully. We need a change in the teachers, a change in the curriculum, a change for something better. I must meet with the Hokage. Next day. So early. That was the only thought echoing through my mind as I sat in the Hokage tower at 5 in the morning. The room was bathed in the soft, pre-dawn light, casting long shadows across the floor and walls. A silence hung in the air, heavy and expectant, as if the building itself was still asleep. School wasn't set to start for another 3 hours, giving me plenty of time to get this done. As I mulled over the day ahead, a yawn forced its way out, wide and gaping. My mouth opened in a silent, tired stretch, the strain of the sleepless night evident in the stiffness of my jaw and the dryness of my throat. Thank God I didn't try to become an Anbu, I thought with a snort, feeling the weight of last night's tiredness settling into my bones. The events of the previous evening had stretched long into the night, leaving me bleary-eyed and foggy-brained as morning crept in. "Chunin Iruka, the Hokage will see you now," the secretary's voice cut through the quiet, pulling me back to the moment. I shook my head in an attempt to clear the lingering fog of sleep deprivation, gathering the stack of files I had prepared. As I stood, my limbs protested, stiff and sore from sitting too long in the same position. I rubbed the sleep from my eyes and steadied myself, feeling the cool air of the office brush against my face as I moved towards the Hokage's office. Each step felt heavier than usual, my body pleading for just a few hours of rest. But duty called, and I couldn't keep the Hokage waiting. With a deep, steadying breath, I opened the door and stepped inside, immediately struck by the sight of the old, weathered face of a man who carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. The Hokage's intense, focused eyes met mine as I entered his office. He wore his traditional wide-brimmed hat, adorned with a red symbol, its white rim framing his face like a halo of wisdom and authority. "Iruka, what are you doing here?" I couldn't help but raise my eyebrows in response. It was startling to realize that the Hokage, the leader of our village, recognized a relatively unknown Chunin like me. I pushed aside the endearing thought, steadying my nerves as I prepared to address the matters at hand. "Hokage-sama, I am here regarding some matters of great importance," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Hiruzen raised an eyebrow, a silent invitation for me to continue. "Yesterday, I was informed of a message from an Anbu related to Naruto," I added, noticing how clarity formed on the old man's face. "Yes, is there any issue?" he asked, his voice calm yet carrying an underlying sharpness. "No, sir, but I believe it would be better if I took over the ANBU's mission, considering it seems like Naruto wasn't the only one being tampered with," I explained, my words immediately catching the Hokage's attention. "Elaborate," he commanded, the weight of that single word pressing down on me as if threatening to crush me under its burden. "Yes, Hokage-sama. As per the ANBU's request, I gathered all of Naruto's student records, scores, and exams. While I have already provided the necessary items to the ANBU, I conducted my own investigation, and I think you'll find my findings rather alarming." I pulled out a few files and laid them in front of the Hokage. "These files are the exam results of the last 6 months for Naruto Uzumaki and Sasuke Uchiha." The Hokage nodded, his eyes scanning the documents as I continued. "These have been rechecked." "Yes, sir. My investigation was to verify the ANBU's claims about sabotage against Naruto. I did a comparison between a control group and Naruto. The control group includes tests from top-ranking students like Uchiha Sasuke, Sakura Haruno, Shino Aburame, and others. However, as I began the comparison, I noticed disparities in both groups. For instance, Sasuke's score when independently checked was 88, but his scores in the school files were 98, and this was a trend. A trend, not a mistake. Yes, and I began rechecking every single one of the exams from the last 6 months, and the exact same pattern emerged. Sasuke's results were consistently higher than the actual results, Naruto's were lower, and similar discrepancies were found with other students, I explained, laying a detailed file of all my findings on the table, the weight of my sleepless night and the gravity of my discoveries making my hands tremble slightly. "Sit." "Yes, sir," I replied, grateful for the chance to rest my weary legs. As I sat, I felt the intensity of the moment. As the minute ticked by, it felt impossibly long. The Hokage's gaze was fixed on me, his eyes weighing and assessing. The quiet in the room was oppressive, heightening the tension I felt. Chunins aren't normally expected to do S-rank missions, the Hokage finally broke the silence. Hearing the words, a jolt of panic shot through me. SS rank, I stuttered out, my voice barely above a whisper. The Hokage nodded gravely. Whoever is the culprit, a large chunk of the education of clan heirs has been undermined, he explained, his voice serious and foreboding. The implications are terrifying. First, it is a very long-term kind of sabotage, aimed at ensuring that if the future leading figures of the village are incapable, the village itself will falter. Those who survive may face engineered ambushes, targeting specific genin squads to kill or cripple an underprepared member or two. Second, this is a subtle kind of sabotage. It's not about an overt attack, it's about manipulating ninjas when they're most vulnerable, young and still training. The aim is to skew their development, making them overconfident or, conversely, completely devoid of self-confidence. Third, it is nearly impossible to identify the puppeteer without first catching the spies, as any major enemy of Konoha would benefit from such actions. As the Hokage spoke, my heart pounded in my chest, and my palms began to sweat. A nervous tic started under my left eye, and I found myself tapping my foot rapidly on the floor, barely aware of the movement. And I am certain there are numerous spies at work, he concluded. Now, do you want to take over the ANBU's mission, Chunin Iruka? Time seemed to freeze. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. I believe that my investigation wouldn't arouse much suspicion. The teachers trust me, they don't suspect me. As long as I can be provided with the resources, I believe I can uncover a clue, a trail, or even a spy, Hokage-sama. You will be given the Hokage's seal for the S-rank mission. Thank you, Hokage-sama, I replied, standing up and bowing deeply. I won't let you down. For the future of Konoha, I hope you don't. Maybe it was the adrenaline, or maybe it was just my fears for the future taking hold, but I found the courage to speak up. Hokage-sama, with your permission, may I share my ideas for the future of Konoha's youth and their education? Proceed, the Hokage said, giving a nod of approval as I took out my journal and spread it across his table, the pages filled with my critiques and observations of the current educational system. Hiruzen read through the journal intently, his hand flipping the pages while his eyes meticulously scanned the words. After closing the journal, he looked up and remarked, "Quite the ambitions you have there, Iruka." I gulped, the weight of my mission pressing down on me. It's not about ambitions, sir. As long as I can provide for the next generation, as long as I can give them a fighting chance. I paused, closing my eyes for a moment to gather my thoughts. As long as I don't have to greet my students' names on gravestones, I believe change is necessary. Nicely said, the old man nodded, pulling out his smoking pipe. He skillfully packed the tobacco into the bowl, lit it with a small flicker of pure flame manipulation, and took a deep draw. The smoke curled around him, creating a veil of contemplation. The Hokage offered me the pipe, but I declined. "Iruka, when is the graduation exam?" he asked, blowing out a perfect ring of smoke. "In 5 days, sir," I responded, trying to hide my reaction to the smoke as it swirled through the air. "Do you have an idea on how we can help them?" "As a matter of fact, I do, sir," I said, a hint of pride in my voice. The Hokage motioned for me to continue. "Even if we only have 5 days, I believe assessing the students' elemental nature affinity, giving them a crash course on a single D-rank elemental technique, alongside teaching them advanced chakra control exercises like tree walking, is something that can be done. I don't think 5 days are enough. Sir, we are only giving them a crash course on the topic, like a base that they can work on under their Jonin sensei. As I recall, the first month of a genin is known as the D-rank gauntlet." The Hokage nodded, clearly liking the idea. Implement it, he decided, and I could almost hear the tactical gears turning in his mind. Relief washed over me as I stood there, feeling a mix of exhaustion and satisfaction. "Iruka, can you tell me what brought this on?" The Hokage motioned towards the files strewn across his desk as I took a deep breath to steady myself. "Naruto," I simply stated. "Elaborate." "Yesterday, I was helping Naruto with the fireball jutsu." "Why does Naruto have AC rank jutsu?" The Hokage's voice held a note of concern, and I could practically see the worry flicker in his eyes. "Naruto and fire were notoriously a risky combination. He said he got it from beating Sasuke Uchiha in a fight." I watched as the Hokage gave a slow, thoughtful nod. Well, I guided him on how to do the jutsu, I continued, and I could almost hear the surprise in the third's voice as he mentally exclaimed, "You did what?" Naruto was able to do it on his first try. A ball-sized fireball, I explained, noticing a flicker of pride cross the Hokage's face for Naruto's accomplishment. But what set all this in motion was Naruto's second attempt, where he managed to create a house-sized fireball. The average Chunin would be embarrassed by the size of Naruto's fireball. The Hokage took a deeper draw from his smoking pipe, the tobacco crackling softly. I was ashamed that I couldn't see Naruto's potential, and initially, I wanted to recheck Naruto's papers and then go and give him a confidence boost that he was amazing, but I found the sabotage and the rest is history, I confessed, feeling the weight of my words hang in the air. The Hokage exhaled a ring of smoke. Konoha has failed its youth. No, Hokage-sama, someone deliberately tried to make it seem that Konoha failed its youth. No, even without this mysterious saboteur, people would still try to harm Naruto, he replied, his shoulders slumping as if the weight was too heavy for the man who had fostered 3 generations of Konoha shinobi. If I may, Hokage-sama, I ventured cautiously. You may. I think Naruto deserves the truth about the fox, I suggested, feeling the gravity of my proposal. You are dismissed, was his curt reply. Thank you for your time, Hokage-sama. I bowed and began to leave the room but stopped at the door, turning back. Hokage-sama, Naruto hasn't been at school for a couple of weeks. Initially, I thought it was because he was sad since the Yamanaka heiress rejected him, but now I feel like Naruto knew about the sabotage before any of us. Hiruzen froze, his mind racing back to the last time he had seen Naruto, those calculating eyes that rivaled Shikaku's in their depth and understanding. Inoichi's paranoid words echoed in his mind. Let Naruto know the truth from someone he trusts rather than someone who doesn't have the best intentions for him. That was all I said as I opened the door and left. Uruka motherfucking Yumino had a class to teach. Her father had always recited a particular saying to her, in the serpent's whispers, lie bits of truth. He used this phrase to teach her the importance of sifting through rumors, to extract the truth hidden within the lies. Now, as whispers and rumors swirled all around her, Ino clung to one certain fact she had managed to discern. Yamanaka Ino knew that the end was near. It was one thing to have challenged Uchiha Sasuke to a spar, and quite another to realize that Sasuke had not shown up for said spar. The people at the academy had spun it in as many different ways as they could, in as many different stories or tales as their imaginations, primitive, wild, or vivid, could go. Some had assumed that it simply meant Sasuke did not consider Ino worth his time, and as such, had dismissed the challenge. Others had claimed that Ino was actually going to use her Yamanaka abilities to mind rape the Uchiha into blissful oblivion, and as such, he was wise to avoid the fight. Some even went as far as to believe that Sasuke was afraid of her, because she was his mistress or something completely ridiculous. And just like that, she was immediately the most popular girl in school. This is torture. She groaned as she made her way to the academy, unable to not notice the stares, the whispers, the pointing fingers, and hushed conversations. It's not that bad, Ino. Thankfully, she had at her sides the only 2 boys she could call her friends at the moment. To her left, Shikamaru walked, his eyes were like that of a tranquilized giraffe, staring vacantly at the path ahead without much care or attention to the rumor mill. Truly, Ino felt that the boy's level of apathy was slowly transcending mortal limits. In contrast, to her right, Choji was animatedly eating a bag of potato chips, and though he seemed quite as normal as usual, Ino could tell he was nervous. He bit at the chips 3 times before swallowing them, whereas she knew he could simply toss one into his mouth, and often did simply toss one into his mouth, chewing twice to savor the flavor before swallowing. She rubbed at her temples, not sure if she should be proud or creeped out at the fact that she had memorized her friend's eating habits enough to ascertain when something was wrong. I mean, all the girls look at you as though you're some sort of messiah now. She let out another painstaking groan. Unfortunately, the consensus as to why Sasuke had not shown up had rung in favor of the theory that he was afraid of her. Now, there were tales going up as to how she was the second coming of Tsunade Senju, possessing a frightening fighting prowess that even the last Uchiha, a certified prodigy in his own right, was terrified of going against. It'll blow over soon enough, Shikamaru had said in his usual lazy drawl. These things usually do. It was true, in a sense. All she had to do was not add fire to any of the slowly increasing, utterly ridiculous flames that were the rumor mill, and soon enough, they'd see, and they'd come to realize, that there was absolutely no truth to any of it. The only small benefit was that the Uchiha Sasuke fan club had actually died. Ino herself could not explain how that worked. The majority of the girls who were usually chanting and celebrating about Sasuke had become incredibly subdued. The Ino Shikacho trio took up their usual sitting positions in the class, with Shikamaru's immediate impression of a drunken sloth, Choji's impression of an eager foodie, and Ino's, well, Ino. The moment Sasuke entered the classroom, the entire room fell into a stunned silence. The state he was in shocked everyone, especially Ino. Sasuke appeared as though he had been thrown through multiple walls. His eye was blackened, and numerous bandages wrapped his head, neck, arms, and legs. A fresh cut on his lip seemed to draw the most attention. Without a word, Sasuke walked to his seat, his glare fixed on a cup of noodles in his hand. He sat down heavily, still staring intently at the cup as if it were the source of his woes. And then, the girls that fawned over him entered the class. The thickening silence slowly rose. And they all silently dragged their feet into the back seats, as far away from Uchiha Sasuke as possible. The end is nigh, Shikamaru. Mark my words. The end is nigh. You're not a prophet, Ino. It'd be really troublesome if you were. Then how do you explain that? Ino demanded, pointing at Sasuke, and instantly, like oil to fire, the rumors around them escalated. Look at that, Ino-sama is gloating to her friends about how she beat Sasuke Uchiha. Amazing, amazing. Ino-sama is so awesome. I wish I could be like her, someone whispered audibly. Ino felt a massive headache brewing as the whispers grew, but she found a glimmer of relief when she saw Shikamaru turn his attention towards Sasuke. Maybe he could figure this out. But then, Shikamaru merely laid his head down, murmuring, too much work. Shika, help me understand how Sasuke got like that, Ino pleaded. Naruto, a monotone voice interjected, almost making Ino jump. She turned to find Shino looking at her, a bug crawling on his finger. Ino shuddered at the sight of the bug, but Shino's words firmly captured her attention. What does Naruto have to do with this? My bugs have detected large amounts of Naruto's residual chakra on Sasuke's body. They had a fight, and judging by Sasuke's condition, it wasn't just a spar, Shino explained. Naruto fought Sasuke, Ino repeated slowly, trying to piece the information together. Ino, you look like you're trying to fight back a smile, Choji remarked, taking a bite of his chips. Ino immediately hid her mouth behind her hand, her mind racing to piece together the reasons behind Naruto's fight with Sasuke. Was Naruto absent from class because he was training? But why train just to fight Sasuke? To prove himself. Why now? As she contemplated Naruto's recent actions, her training as a Yamanaka pushed her to probe deeper into the psychological underpinnings. Why had Naruto, usually so boisterous and straightforward, chosen such a dramatic way to prove himself? The fight with Sasuke, the intense training, wasn't it all just a bit too theatrical, even for him? Ino chewed on her lip, her gaze flickering to Naruto's usual empty seat. He had confessed to her, yes, and then thrown himself into this conflict. Was it merely a bid for her attention? Or perhaps it was his way of coping with rejection, by trying to elevate his status through victory. Naruto fought Sasuke because of me, Ino concluded aloud, causing Shino, Choji, and even Shikamaru to look at her as if she had lost her mind. Think about it, what's the last thing Naruto did when he came to school? She pressed on. He fought me, Shino said simply. But the day before, Ino countered, he confessed to me. And in that confession, he mentioned Sasuke. This means he went into training to prove himself better than Sasuke and then planned to confess to me again when he came back, a better man. Ino's voice rose with excitement. This is just like the plot of my favorite novel, she squealed. Shikamaru sighed, his mind lazily trailing off as he listened to Ino passionately draw parallels between her life and her favorite novel, The Bloody Love. He shook his head slightly, knowing full well he hadn't actually read the book, but Ino never seemed to tire of discussing it. The novel was about a cop who confesses his love to a serial killer, only to be rejected, and later finds the killer dead. The plot twists continued from there, but Shikamaru never paid enough attention to catch all the details. Even so, her drawing parallels between the novel and herself is just her habit of identification, Shikamaru mused internally, a small frown tugging at the corners of his mouth as he watched Ino animatedly explain how Naruto's actions mirrored the novel's protagonist. Shikamaru paused, glancing at Ino. He knew her well enough to understand her type, someone who brought an element of intrigue and suspense into her life, much like the characters in her beloved mystery thrillers. That's why she had a crush on Sasuke Uchiha initially, he thought, remembering how that fascination had quickly turned into a rivalry with Sakura. She's long since moved on from Sasuke, though. And now, Shikamaru continued in his head, this whole delusion of paralleling Naruto's actions to a novel plotline is just an expression of her crush. He sighed again, deeper this time. He could easily dismantle Ino's delusions with logic, but he knew all too well that would just invite trouble. Arguing with Ino could unleash a storm of emotional backlash he had no desire to weather. Too troublesome, Shikamaru muttered under his breath, his body slouching further into his chair. The thought of an angry Ino, blonde hair flaring as she stormed at him for hours, was more than enough to deter him from voicing his skepticism. Better to let her theories go unchallenged than to engage in an exhausting debate. Dear Kami, could this day get any weirder? Then, just as Shikamaru had uttered that prayer, that question to the gods, Yumino Uruka walked into the classroom. Silent, quiet, as though he were not supposed to be their teacher, and immediately, all eyes strayed towards his direction and his odd behavior. Then, he brought up their thick, hardback, Academy-issued manuscript. Kaden. And he set it on fire. The end is nigh, Ino whispered into his ear. Good, this world is too troublesome to begin with. Training ground. Alert. World quest. Quest title. Help Hinata. Description. A special day for Hinata is approaching. Assist her. Closing square bracket. Objective. Do a spar with Hinata to help her gain some confidence in her skills. Closing square bracket. Rewards. Plus 100 reputation with the Hyuga clan, 200 experience points. Closing square bracket. Failure. Minus 200 reputation with the Hyuga clan, Hinata will be inflicted with status, avoidant personality disorder. Closing square bracket. Naruto-kun, I should be in class right now. Naruto didn't answer immediately, his attention was fixed on the system. An hour ago, he had received a notification. Normally, he was fine with helping his friend, but the sight of the failure tab had made his heart skip a beat. To aid her, he had intercepted Hinata as she was walking to the academy and was now pulling her along to the training grounds. Hinata, is there an important day coming up? Naruto asked, breaking the silence as they walked. Hinata froze, her gaze dropping. How did you know that? Naruto sidestepped the question. Can you tell me more about it? He pressed gently, guiding her forward with a light touch on her back. Hinata sighed, her shoulders drooping slightly. It's the semi-annual report. The elders of the Hyuga clan and my father all gather to discuss many things about the clan. Since I am the daughter of the patriarch, I have to show off my skills and prove that I am worthy of being the heir. Seeing that constipated look, is something wrong? Naruto asked, trying to lighten the mood with a joke. Hinata giggled, the sound like a small bell in the quiet morning. No, it's just that every year I feel like my performance is getting more and more better, Naruto interjected with a hopeful smile. No, worse, Hinata corrected him, her smile fading. 2 years ago, my father said my performance was adequate, and last year he was just silent. Can I say this bluntly? Naruto asked, his expression serious. Hinata nodded, her eyes wide with anticipation. Your father sounds like a douche. As expected, Hinata gasped. Sorry for saying it, but you deserve all the praise. Hinata blushed at those words but quickly shook her head, dismissing the compliment. Naruto, however, was not deterred. He reached out and gently placed his hand on her cheek, guiding her to look up at him. Hinata, I know for a fact, out of everyone in our class, you are the strongest girl. Then why do I lose? Hinata whispered, her eyes closing in resignation. Hinata, look at me, Naruto said warmly, waiting a few seconds for her to open her eyes again. When she did, her soft lavender gaze met his clear blue eyes. You lose because you hold back, you let them win, Naruto stated frankly. That's not true. In response, Naruto activated spirit possession, seeking some much-needed guidance for what to do next. Okay, we are here. Let's spar, he declared, choosing not to counter Hinata's words. He instinctively knew that words wouldn't prove anything right now, actions would. But Hinata protested, her voice laced with hesitation. Naruto didn't wait for her to finish. He took a jab, his explosive chakra blasting air towards Hinata, causing her hair to whip wildly around her face. He stopped his punch just inches from her face, demonstrating his control. Hinata, you can dodge my sheer force technique, especially with those eyes of yours, he said, confidence underpinning his words. Naruto-kun, let's just stop. I need to get to class, Hinata replied, her voice trembling slightly. You can go after this spar is done, Naruto insisted gently. Really? Yes, Naruto affirmed, stepping back a few feet to give them both space. Let's begin. Naruto took on the flash fist stance. Hinata took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. She activated her Byakugan, her veins bulging slightly around her temples. She extended one palm forward, fingers slightly curled. Her legs moved into a wide stance, one foot forward, the other back, giving her a stable base and the agility to move quickly. Naruto launched two shurikens towards Hinata, who expertly deflected them with her palms. He paused, expecting her to seize the moment to go on the offensive, but Hinata remained firmly defensive, her stance unwavering. Fine, I'll force you to acknowledge your own strength, Naruto thought resolutely. His ankles glowed with accumulated chakra, and in a blink, he vanished, reappearing instantly in front of Hinata. He launched a high kick towards her head, but Hinata was quick to react. She dodged smoothly, her body bending just enough to let the kick whoosh over her. Naruto's kick continued in a powerful arc, his leg swinging through the air with such force that it tore up the ground beneath him. Yet, mid-motion, he deliberately stopped, exposing his entire back to Hinata, challenging her to attack, to take some action beyond mere defense. Hinata, however, chose caution over confrontation. She quickly assessed the situation and, instead of attacking, leapt back to create a safe distance between them. Hinata's eyes widened in alarm as she watched Naruto quickly form hand signs. Naruto-kun, isn't that a bit much for a spar? She asked, her voice trembling with fear. Ignoring her plea, Naruto unleashed the fire-style, fireball jutsu. A massive, roaring fireball shot towards her, the intense heat washing over her face and the fierce glow illuminating her wide, fearful eyes. She realized in a flash of terror that if she didn't act, she might not survive. Driven by a primal instinct to survive, time seemed to slow for Hinata. Her hands moved almost of their own accord, channeling chakra into her wristbands. With a puff of smoke, her Nakote appeared, the chakra metal claws ready. She quickly channeled chakra into the claws, shaping them into needle-like extensions that dramatically increased her reach. As the enormous fireball barreled towards her, Hinata focused on detecting its weak point, the chakra grain. The chakra grain referred to the pattern and flow direction of the chakra within the ninjutsu. Successfully striking this grain, either vertically or horizontally based on its orientation, could effectively break the jutsu apart. Hinata saw the chakra grain running through the fireball. She pinpointed the optimal spot and, with a swift, precise movement, struck it vertically right at the center. Her action mirrored slicing through soft butter. The fireball split neatly into two halves, each veering off and fizzling out harmlessly beside her. Hinata's knees buckled, her heart pounding like a drum, and she collapsed onto the ground, her back pressing against the cool earth. She lay there, struggling to control her heaving breaths. Naruto walked over and sat beside her, his presence comforting yet contemplative. I don't think Sakura or Ino, or the majority of our class could do what you just did. You know, the Nakotes are a weapon that requires aggressive offense to wield. Tenten gave you those weapons to help you be more aggressive because that's the only thing you lack. Not power, not technique, not skill, just aggression. And I'm not talking about aggression from anger, but aggression in taking charge. You know what I mean, right? Hinata managed a weak nod, absorbing his words. Tenten gave you the Nakote so you can learn to take charge, Naruto continued, his voice gentle yet firm. Because Tenten knows this, I know this, and most of all, you know this. You are capable of so much more. Overwhelmed by the truth in his words, Hinata closed her eyes, a myriad of thoughts swirling through her mind. There's enough bloodshed and cruelty in this world. Be that smidge of missing kindness, make friends, talk things out, and maybe things will become better. Hinata recited her mother's words as if they were a shield against her own insecurities about aggression. Naruto sighed, his gaze lifting to the sky as he pondered her words. Are these the words of someone close? My late mother, Hinata replied, her voice soft. A heavy silence fell between them, filled only by the distant sounds of the leaves in the wind. After a moment, Naruto broke the silence. Hinata, can I say something very bluntly? You are the definition of blunt, Naruto, Hinata responded with a small giggle. Okay, then, Hinata, answer me this, do you think being confident is cruel? Do you think being able to take charge is cruel? Do you think standing up for yourself is cruel? Each question struck Hinata deeply, exposing the gap between who she was and who she wanted to be. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she lifted her arm to hide them. But before she could, Naruto's hand gently stopped her, holding her arm gently. Hinata, it's okay to be shy, to be meek, to be anxious, to not be aggressive. There is nothing wrong with that, but do you want to be all of that? No, Hinata whispered, her voice barely audible. I can't hear you, Naruto said, encouraging her to find her voice. No, she said a bit louder. I can't hear you, Naruto yelled back, pushing her further. No, Hinata finally screamed, releasing all her pent-up frustrations and fears. Naruto smiled gently, reaching out to wipe away her tears. Let's stand up, he said, offering both a literal and metaphorical hand. Hinata heard the deeper message in his words, the encouragement to rise beyond her current self. Can I be better, Naruto-kun? She asked, her voice trembling with hope. It is never too late to be what you might have been. Hinata smiled, her heart lighter, feeling the genuine possibility of transformation as she clasped his hand, ready to stand up and embrace the change. Sarutobi Asuma did not consider himself a ladies' man. This, he supposed, was an unfortunate side effect of his questionably roguish looks and appearance. He was built strong and hardy, and his finely developed beard was one thing that accentuated his appearance more firmly than anything else. Of course, the fact that his lips were almost often occupied with a familiar white stick, and his breath unfortunately stank of dry, acrid smoke could also be a major detractor. That was why, on this particular day, he had made sure to get the strongest breath mints he could find before he entered the Jonin's lounge. Recently back from a rather successful mission, wallet filled to the brim with suitable wealth and satisfaction, all that was missing from his life at this moment was a companion to which he could share all his victories and successes. Being a former member of the Fire Daimyo's own elite bodyguard squad, the 12 Guardians had often put him in many situations where he would find young and beautiful women, and where he would have to either protect or kill these young and beautiful women as the job required. Betting them, of course, had happened, once, or twice, but he knew, and they knew, that the act in and of itself had no real meaning, and it was merely two people attempting to release some steam from the rigid routines of their daily life, with the sweet caresses and touch of the opposite sex. A relationship was an impossibility, as he was a shinobi, and they were most certainly not. Hence, it made sense to him, as to find someone who he could possess a relationship with, someone who would not be squeamish as he regaled her with the grimy and unfortunate details of his job, someone who could understand and relate with said grimy and unfortunate details, and someone, who overall, could stand at his side if need be, facing off enemies in a valiant defense for their home and their loved ones. And he felt, that he knew exactly just who that person was. Walking into the lounge, his breath was as fresh as newly plucked and squeezed mint leaves, his gait and back as straight as a kunai thrown by Kami himself, his chest puffed up, shoulders broadened, and the thick, wafting smell of cologne trailing around him like a wispy specter whispering encouraging words into his ears. Asuma was certain that nothing could go wrong. Until the sound of sweet, melodious laughter entered his ears, the laughter of none other than the very person he felt could be his destined soulmate. Wow, did she really? A small part of him grew irate, as he realized that there was someone there chatting her up, another Jonin most likely. It was to be expected, as she was a reasonably new Jonin, freshly promoted from her previous rank of special Jonin as her genjutsu skills had ultimately gained recognition, and her work in the field had marked her as exceptional above her peers. She was also beautiful, incredibly so, with an appearance that often left him a blithering mess, abandoning all forms of grace and finesse that his occupation had drilled into him, and leaving him able to do nothing but smile at her. He eventually walked forward, ready to see who could possibly be the one he would deem as his competition, the one who could possibly make her laugh as sweetly as she did. His eyes were not ready for the orange, nor the green, nor the spandex, nor the bowl cut. Ah, Asuma-san, how youthful of you to join us. Nor was he ready for the yelling. No one was ever ready for the yelling. His lips crinkled into a grimaced smile. Guy, nice to see you too. Barring the exception of his father, the Hokage, and perhaps, the copy ninja, Kakashi, Maeda Guy was the strongest shinobi presently within the walls of Konoha. Asuma could not hate the man, because he had accomplished a great deal of feats, and he was a true and trusted ally of the village, who would sooner kill himself than betray it, and he would be just as willing to give his life in defense of it. Still, his eyes trailed over to her form, the woman who often had him turning in his bed for many a nights, whose chilling red eyes could stun him to stupor, whose laughter could make him melt and float and burn all in one instance. Yuichi Kurenai stood, actually happy to be in the man's presence. There was nothing inherently wrong with Guy, of course. He was a good shinobi, a strong shinobi, a loyal friend, an honorable man, a great man even. However, he was flashy, visible, boisterous and extremely eccentric. Surely Kurenai had no interest in him, right? Right. Kurenai-san, great to see you as well. Likewise Sarutobi-san, he inwardly grimaced. Please, call me Asuma, anything but Sarutobi-san. The name Sarutobi was the name of his clan and the name of his father, and it was not his name. Not his legacy. He wanted as little to be connected to it as humanly possible. Guy-san was just telling me about some of the exploits of the sole female student on his genin team. Asuma rose an eyebrow at that. Really? Idly, the guardian shinobi wondered if it was possible for Guy to have gotten even more enthusiastic. Of course, young Tenten is a vibrant and budding flower amongst a large field that is youth. Could this man create a sentence that did not have that damned word in it? Still, Asuma could not help his lips twitching into a slight chuckle. There was no mistaking the emotion that was clear in Guy's eyes, the sheer unbridled pride which permeated from his form like the thick musk of scented candles. Tenten not only graduated as the kunoichi of the year, she was so far ahead of her female peers, that had it not been for Sandame Sama's law about the graduating age, she would have graduated the academy much sooner. Kurenai's eyes were sparkling at this point. Oh, crap, this was not particularly good. Kurenai was the type of woman who enjoyed hearing about other successful kunoichi, particularly if they were still young and budding. If Guy went on further about his student, Kurenai might be interested in seeing her, and if she got to see Guy's student on a regular basis, it meant that she got to see Guy on a regular basis, and if one thing led to another. Oh, Guy-san, Kurenai said, now clad in iconic green latex, smiling and winking, please show me your power of youth. No, 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 no. Get a grip, man. What was he thinking? This was Guy he was thinking about. This was Kurenai. Come on. And even if she did, somehow, end up dating someone else, sure, it would suck, and it may leave a vacuum in his chest, but it wasn't like he owned her, or could make her decisions for her. So why was he so goddamned paranoid about losing something that didn't even belong to him? He coughed awkwardly. You know, I was thinking of taking on a team as well from the next graduating set. Kurenai and Guy turned to him at the same time. Really? No, not really. He was not exactly the best type of person cut out for teaching, because he enjoyed a simple and sweet lifestyle. Sure, he had gained a few students here and there and taught them, but that was entirely different from having a genin team. Hell, he couldn't even imagine himself sitting down a bunch of troublesome brats and constantly being responsible for their lives and ensuring that they didn't go out there to get themselves killed. Of course, he couldn't say that now, could he? Kurenai was looking straight at him. Of course, he said, the words escaping his lips as though it were not the furthest thing from the truth. There's something about children, the amount of potential they have in them. They can do great things, greater things than we can imagine, if only we let them, teach them, and help them. Her eyes softened, and in his mind, a mini version of himself did a small victory dance. Yosh, your words ring so true, Asuma-san. I should have known that a man directly related to the Sandaime would be truly so honorable. He mashed his teeth together, forcing it into a smile. There it was again. Always, everywhere, every time, every single bloody time. A man directly related to the Sandaime. 27 years. 27 full years of living, and it still happened. Jenin at 9. Chunin at 12. Jonin at 16. Black market bounty of 35 million Ryo. 150 A rank missions completed. 18 S rank missions successful. None of that mattered when your father was the bloody, damned god of shinobi. Or worse, all of it was expected. Damn, he needed a smoke. The reprimand he would get for smoking the familiar white stick from Kurenai would be far more preferable than the surly repercussions continuing the conversation in his slightly irritable mood. As expected, Kurenai's nose wrinkled when she saw his slim white companion. Those things will kill you, you know. He laughed even as he whipped out his lighter. Kurenai-san, if I'm killed by these, I'm one of the lucky ones. It would mean that he had lived long enough for the smoke to do significant damage, and that alone was of course, a rather grim fact. She realized it too, and her face immediately went slightly grim. Smooth Asuma. Real smooth. Way to kill a mood. Ah, now that the youthful Asuma-san brought up the issue of children. He rose an eyebrow as he realized that Guy seemed slightly less solemn, and then he turned his attention to Kurenai. I will confess, Kurenai-san, the reason I started up a conversation with you today was not entirely random. It has to do with a rather serious matter. Asuma choked on his cigarette. No way, Guy was Guy about to ask Kurenai out? The issue of children, did he want to have? It seemed that he was not the only one with that thought in mind, as Kurenai's eyes widened, her eyes flicking over to him slightly. Oh. And what exactly is the reason? Guy slowly let out a hefty, but still hearty, sigh. I am afraid that I do not quite understand the workings of a maiden's mind, let alone her heart, and alas, I wish to make my proposal to you. No, this was not happening. Asuma stared at his cigarette as though it were a completely foreign object, questioning if the nicotine within had been replaced with some foreign substance that was responsible for this unbelievable scene. However, the one consolation was that Kurenai looked unusually distressed. Could it be? Yes, she didn't like him. And now that Asuma thought about it, that was kind of sad for the big guy, but that was so much better for him. Actually, Guy-san, Kurenai said, cutting him off before he uttered another word and also clearing her throat. I just remembered that Asuma and I have not been entirely honest with you either. You haven't. We haven't. A heeled foot slammed on his pinky. I mean, Asuma said, wincing, yes, we haven't. Sarutobi Asuma was not a religious person, but even he could not help but feel that this was the work of some sort of god, pleasantly interfering in his life for once. Kurenai's eyes flickered over to him, and it didn't take long for him to interpret and act. His arm slid over her shoulder. Kurenai and I have been together for some time now. At her smile and nod, Sarutobi Asuma knew without a shadow of a doubt. There is a god. Yosh, that is wonderful. Two sets of confused eyes stared in unison. Come again. Asuma had not realized that it was possible for Guy to be even more enthusiastic than normal. It is absolutely amazing. Asuma-san, Kurenai-san, may your blossoming love flourish into something of legend. Wait, wasn't he supposed to be disappointed? You, Asuma tested the word, you're not mad. Guy blinked in confusion. I do not understand. Why would I be? Your proposal. Yes. I was going to request that Kurenai-san aid me in assisting my student Tenten. She has been. Guy smiled, taking on a lot of E-rank missions alone, and she refuses to explain and is actually completing a lot of E-rank missions on her own. Like 3 per day, and I think she has already done around 34 in total. I know I should be happy that Tenten's youthful flames are burning so brightly, but I am worried for her. As she is adopted by her soul father and is lacking a key feminine parental figure in her life, I was hoping that Kurenai-san could step in and shed some light, or perhaps assist her with her issues. Oh. So when you mentioned children, Kurenai began. I was referring to my student, yes. And when you said you did not understand the workings of a maiden's mind or heart, Asuma continued. I was still referring to my student, he clarified, before his eyes lit up once more. Oh, but this is such great news. Two wonderful friends of mine are together and bound by the most youthful force of all. Ha, ha ha, yeah, we're together all right. Wait, why was Kurenai glaring at him? Wasn't this also partly her idea? Ah, that reminds me, Kurenai-san, about my request. Of course, I'd be absolutely happy to help your student. Guy beamed. Wonderful. Then, he smiled. Ah, I see Kakashi, I am going to engage with him in a series of spars in an attempt to rekindle his flames of youth, I must be off. But Asuma-san, Kurenai-san, I am certain your father and all our friends would be pleased to hear about your relationship. Kurenai's eyes widened. Wait, Guy-san, Yosh, the power of youth burns strong. And the man was gone in a soundless, silent, and utterly professional shunshin. And it was at that moment, Sarutobi Asuma began sweating bullets. So, we're together. Now, if looks could kill, Asuma was certain that he'd be a dead man. Excuse me. A voice suddenly called out, causing Asuma and Kurenai to nearly jump out of their skins. Why didn't I sense anything? Turning around, they saw Naruto standing there, holding a box in his hand. Oh, Naruto, you scared me, Asuma admitted, scratching his head in embarrassment. How could an academy student startle him like that? What are you doing here? Asuma inquired, as Kurenai peered over curiously. I'm not sure, I got this E-rank mission about delivering vitamin D. Anna. Naruto stumbled over the words. Analogs, Asuma helpfully corrected. Yeah, that. Here you go. Naruto said, producing a document and instructing, sign here, here, and here. Asuma complied, still a bit taken aback by the surprise delivery. Thanks. Good luck with your girlfriend. Naruto yelled as he dashed off, leaving a trail of bewilderment behind him. Girlfriend, huh? Kurenai raised an eyebrow, turning to Asuma who suddenly felt very warm under her gaze. I need a smoke, Asuma thought desperately, trying to deflect from the unexpected comment on his personal life. He glanced at the medication Naruto had delivered for his psoriasis, a reminder of why the ninja lifestyle wasn't always glamorous. Wait, why is Naruto doing E-rank missions? Naruto dashed toward the training ground, arriving just in time to see Hinata dodge Tenten's Naginata. As she landed, Hinata lunged forward, the Nakote on her hands glowing with chakra. Tenten evaded the attack with a substitution jutsu, and Hinata grabbed the log that appeared in Tenten's place, hurling it toward the treeline. Tenten leapt from behind the trees, slicing down midair. Hinata countered the descending Naginata with an upper slash, her claw meeting Tenten's blade in a clash of metal. Quickly pivoting, Hinata dodged to the right, positioning herself to strike at Tenten's neck. But Tenten reacted swiftly, spitting out a Senbon with an explosive seal attached. Hinata instinctively jumped back to avoid the blast. Okay, I am going to deduct points, Tenten announced. Why? You jumped back rather than deflecting the Senbon. Those eyes of yours can render most fear tactics useless as long as you keep calm and take charge. But I will say, you have drastically improved from yesterday, Tenten explained. What are you talking about? A little more push and Hinata would have beaten you, Naruto interjected, earning a hush from Hinata and an eye roll from Tenten. Don't worry, after Hinata beats me, she'll come for you, Tenten retorted. So you admit that you are weaker than Hinata? Naruto teased, as Hinata blushed, trying to diffuse the tension between them. Since you are here, are you done with today's quota? Tenten asked, changing the subject. Yep, but I had to turn off the transformation since I was delivering to a Jonin, Naruto replied, handing Tenten the documents. Good, now get to your chakra control practice. I need to help Hinata with her stances, Tenten directed. An hour later. Skill. Chakra control, level 10. Description. A skill that, when diligently trained, evolves from fundamental to crucial, signifying a shinobi's mastery over chakra. Closing square bracket. Passive enhancements. Chakra efficiency. Decreases chakra consumption by 50% for all jutsu. Closing square bracket. Chakra recovery rate. Improves passive chakra regeneration by 25%. Closing square bracket. Chakra reservoir expansion. Increases total chakra capacity by 40%. Closing square bracket. Elemental affinity enhancement. Reduces the chakra cost of elemental jutsu by an additional 20%. Closing square bracket. Chakra flow stability. greatly reduces the disruption of chakra flow from external influences, enhancing defense against chakra-absorbing techniques by 30%. Closing square bracket. Active. Enhancements. Chakra surge. Temporarily increases chakra flow, boosting the effectiveness of jutsu by 30% for 60 seconds. Activation consumes additional chakra. Closing square bracket. Focus boost. For 60 seconds, enhances concentration, increasing the success rate of complex jutsu by 20%. Closing square bracket. Elemental burst. Allows the user to momentarily enhance their elemental jutsu, increasing damage output by 35% for the next attack. Closing square bracket. Precision control. Grants the ability to finely control chakra distribution, enhancing the efficiency of chakra usage in jutsu by 25% and allowing for simultaneous casting of multiple jutsu. Closing square bracket. Quest. Mastery of the clone jutsu. Status. Successfully completed. Player Naruto has leveled up the chakra control skill to level 10, achieving the necessary proficiency for the clone jutsu. Closing square bracket. Rewards granted. Skill. Academy Clone Jutsu. Closing square bracket. Skill. Academy Style Clone Jutsu, Level 1. Description. A clone employed for distraction, this clone serves as a fundamental technique in the art of deception and strategy. Closing square bracket. Passive enhancements. Deceptive resemblance. Enhances the clone's resemblance to the user by 20%. Closing square bracket. Active enhancements. Tactical retreat. Activation of the clone provides a 10% boost to the user's evasion. Closing square bracket. I felt like I was over the moon. Well, technically, I was in my underwear walking on water, but that was beside the point. Female guys. I yelled out to Hinata and Tenten, who were each enjoying a sandwich made by Hinata. Stop calling us that. Tenten yelled back. No, I replied playfully, forming my hands into the rat seal. The clone jutsu was a simple technique, best explained through the analogy of blowing bubbles. When you blow through a wand, the soap forms a bubble that takes the shape of the wand's circle. Similarly, when using this jutsu, chakra is expelled, leaving a puff of smoke and a chakra bubble that takes on the shape of the user, mimicking simple actions like walking or standing. As my clone materialized, a surge of emotion overcame me. This jutsu represented a significant hurdle I had struggled to overcome. Now, here it was, the result of my hard work, standing naked in orange underwear just like me. Oh, great, now there are 3 of them. At least they can't talk, Tenten joked. Suddenly, I couldn't resist the urge to pull a prank. I reached for my underwear, a mischievous glint in my eyes. Tenten looked horrified, while Hinata, for some reason, seemed eager, almost like a pervert, complete with a bloody nose. With a swift motion, I pulled down my underwear, revealing another layer underneath. Hinata's nose gushed more blood, and she fainted from the shock. Tenten's eyes twitched in irritation. She was definitely mad. Ha ha ha. I couldn't help but laugh at their expressions. Run, Naruto, run. Tenten's coming for you, and she wants revenge for you ruining her meal, Tenten screamed, charging at me with trench knives in her hands. I sprang into action, using the clone jutsu to create distractions as I dove into the water, creating ripples and splashes in my hasty escape. Worth it. Thank for listening. Do hope you enjoy. If you guys enjoyed, if you want a next part of this video, like, subscribe and comment down below and turn on the bell notifications, and also check out the other videos that have created and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.